Good evening. I'm Dr. Cheryl Champ, Superintendent of the Pelham Public Schools, and I am thrilled to be with you tonight to give you just a brief overview of the budget that will be presented to the Pelham community at the May 18th budget vote this year. Point of information that's important for our community to know this year, our vote on May 18th, it's a tax cap compliant budget. We are changing the location of the vote this year due to the construction projects that are going on at the high school. So the vote will actually occur in the middle school gym, which is great. It's more accessible to the community. It's air conditioned, so we have a warm day, and it is far away from the construction. So I just wanted to make folks aware of that so that you know when you come to vote this year, the location is slightly different. With that said, I'm going to dive into the presentation. I know we have a very busy evening tonight. I'll invite now, and I'll try to remember to invite you again at the end to stay on after the budget presentation for the Board of Education Candidates Forum, where they will be answering a slate of questions that were submitted by the community. For now, though, I'm going to share my screen and walk us through the sorry, I've got sharing settings. Walk us through the budget presentation. And I apologize, we're having some technical issues here. And apologize that Google Chrome is not allowing me to share my screen this evening. So what I can do is talk us through the budget. What I would let folks know is if you go to the Board of Education website, if you go to the district website under the Board of Education tab under budget, you should find a copy of this presentation. In the meantime, one of my colleagues is working to pull the presentation up so that we can have a visual for you. Great, thank you so much, Alex. And thanks, folks, for your patience this evening. So again, diving right into the presentation. We begin tonight with the budget proposal that will be going before the community on May 18th. It is a tax cap compliant budget, and the total appropriation amount that is being proposed to the community is in the amount of $80,280,000. That represents a budget to budget increase of 4.67%, which you will see as we get into the presentation is largely driven by additional costs related to the 2018 capital bond projects. That is the most significant driver of that budget to budget increase. The budget that's before you will be before the voters on May 18th is within the cap, as I said, and it is at the allowable tax levy increase of 2.47% based on how this budget was constructed. We are proposing it at that cap to the community. And I say that based on the way that this was constructed, because as you will see, the district used a significant amount of debt service reserve to lower the tax levy within the cap. Had we not used any of that debt service reserve, the budget, the allowable levy would have been 5%. And this budget did use the ability to lower that just over halfway with strategic use of the debt service fund. So we'll talk some more about that in upcoming slides. We can go to the next. So as we have passed the bond back in 2018, we have begun showing the tax increase really in the two different components. There's the operating budget, which represents everything having to do with our day-to-day costs from just everything in the course of the school district. And when we look at the tax cap, we start with either 2% or the CPI, whichever is lower in any given year. Once we know that, and the CPI this year was 1.23, then calculate in the growth factor, which is provided to us by New York State. And that's how we determine our initial base levy allowable increase, which was 1.7%. We then look to see what are the capital exclusions, so capital related ins and outs that impact the tax cap. And for us this year, we did have a positive thing, an increase in building aid, which helped to reduce the local share, the local burden of that. We also had a reduction in existing debt service payments, as well as added on, as I've mentioned and will continue to mention, a significant amount from the debt service fund. Offsetting that, though, we did have the increased cost of the actual capital project itself, which added a significant amount. Once you do all those ins and outs, that adds a 0.77% to the overall tax levy. So then we just take our operating base, the 1.7, add it to the 0.77, and that's where we arrive at the 2.47%. We can go to the next. So just some highlights of the budget that are important for you to know. Certainly coming out of over a year of COVID and remote learning, hybrid learning, we recognize that not all students did well in that environment. So we have budgeted to double our summer programs at the elementary and middle school level. And we'll be talking some about assessments and what the summer programs are going to look like at our board meeting this upcoming Wednesday. We also are adding a credit recovery program at the high school level for students who struggled with earning credit in this remote environment. We're continuing to support our professional staff on implementation of our social emotional programs. So at the secondary level, that is the STEPS A Universal DBT program, dialectical behavior therapy program that's applied in the general ed setting. At the elementary level, that's responsive classroom. We'll be completing the training of the remaining of our faculty this year so that all of our 4 elementary schools can be deemed fully responsive classroom schools. And we're also continuing to support and develop our multi-tiered systems of support K through 12. And that's the framework that we use for identifying students that need additional support, both academically and behaviorally. We are restoring in this budget a world language teaching position that was eliminated a few years ago due to retirement. Our world language enrollments have sustained, which is wonderful. So we're bringing that position back. We're also using that to help lighten the load from our world language coordinator, who also supports our English language learners. This will free her up to have a little more time to be devoted to making sure these students get those supports to which they are entitled and to help them find success. Additionally, we're adding a high school science position. We're very fortunate to have such a strong STEM program and that many of our students at the high school level take science well beyond what they're required to. So due to that increased enrollment, we're adding on a science teaching position. The next 2 items really relate to technology. And again, having come off of a year of COVID, remote learning, hybrid learning, we all recognize our significant dependence on technology. So we added a lot of software titles in this past year to provide resources for students and teachers to be able to successfully engage in the learning experience, whether it was fully remote, hybrid, or in person. And we've come to really depend on a lot of those and integrate them into our practice. So we're sustaining those. We're also continuing to refresh our Chromebook supply. And as you probably know, we currently have a 1-to-1 ratio of Chromebooks from grades 3 through 12. Grades 3 to 5 were designed to stay in the classroom unless, of course, we shift to remote or hybrid learning, and they can be deployed out to students. Grades 6 through 12 are given out to students for them to take back and forth to school on a daily basis. So we're budgeting in to replace those and keep those refreshed. And of course, we are adding additional different devices at the K2 level, things like iPads that are much more appropriate just for the size of the children and the use of the device. Additionally, we're continuing to expand our innovative furnishing initiative. Still continue being extremely appreciative to the PEF, who provided their largest major grant to the district to be the seed money to move us significantly forward with implementation of the innovative furnishings. We have re-outfitted all of our libraries, K-8, with innovative furnishings, as well as a number of pilot rooms in each school building. And the lessons learned from that pilot and that infusion of funding from the PEF were huge drivers in our selection for the furniture for the Hutchinson School. The furniture order was just placed about 2 weeks ago. So the entire building is going to be designed and filled out with flexible furnishings as based on what we've learned through that PEF. So we're appreciative for that and thank you for that. And we're going to continue to budget year after year to spread that to all of our elementary schools as well, so that all students will have access to that more student-centered furnishings. Continuing to keep our class sizes at or below the board guidelines. And so that's a wonderful thing, especially given, again, the year that we've gone through. We can go to the next slide, please. So give you a quick tour of a status update on Hutchinson. The main entrance and the new school is no longer going to be on Lincoln Avenue. It's now going to be on 5th Street. So this is a look at the, the new front of the building. Obviously, main entrance right there in center. To the left is offices, classroom space upstairs as well. There's a kindergarten wing on the left and a kindergarten playground that will be just outside that door, specific for our youngest learners. To the right, the principal's office downstairs, classrooms upstairs, and gymnasium all the way across. We can go to the next. Once you walk in that main door, you turn left, you will see what this picture shows you on the left, the center atrium, which is going to be the creative heart of this building. It's a 2-story atrium with lots of skylight, natural light flooding into there. It'll be a very colorful, vibrant place. That light on the second floor will add additional natural light to some classrooms on one side, hallways on the other. And on the bottom, the space is going to be very open and flowing from one area into another. There's garage doors that will separate things like the library and the maker space from the art room and the main center of the building, where that space can all be opened up. Multiple classes can be there at once, and it can be a very creative, collaborative space. On the right side, you see just a quick picture of what a kindergarten classroom is looking at. So again, you see some very bright, big rooms, bathrooms right within those kindergarten classrooms, and there's 3 of those designed in the school. Next. Great bird's eye view of the new gymnasium on the left. It is the same size as the middle school gym, so it is a regulation basketball court that will be in there. This double-sized gym will have a curtain to divide, just like we do in the middle school. The bleachers will be smaller, but everything about it is still the same size. So this will be a tremendous use for the district's athletic programs, certainly modified freshman, JV, varsity, as well as community rec. We had a great tour with the rec department recently, and really excited about the potential use and opportunities coming from here. The great thing about this gym too, it's directly accessible from the outside. So if there's weekend and evening use, folks don't have to go through the building. We can actually close the gymnasium off from the rest of the building, which will cut down on wear and tear and cleaning and improve security. So really excited about the opportunity there. It'll be a wood floor gym. On the right, you see the other really special space. Hutchinson will have its own dedicated cafeteria, and that's what this picture is. It's taken from standing on the cafeteria floor looking towards the stage. So we're going to have a nice performing arts stage there. We'll have rigging and curtains, sound system, lighting, etc. So the school can have assemblies, plays, concerts, etc. right here in the cafeteria multi-purpose room. What you can't see on the right is the kitchen that will be built in. We have an actual full-time functioning kitchen as part of this. The building has been amazingly going, the work's been done on schedule, actually a little bit ahead of schedule at times, and within budget. So we were actually able to award some of the add alternates, and one of those being the equipment for that kitchen. So it will be a fully outfitted, fully functioning kitchen. We can do food prep right on site. So again, this will be another, it's a great asset for Hutchinson, but this will be a great community asset for us as well. We can certainly, in both of these spaces, think about things like district science fairs, district music festivals, maker festivals, lots of different opportunities to bring our elementary students together within these spaces, but also things like the rec department, our seniors in the community, lots of different opportunities for this space to be used. So we're very excited about that potential. Many of you probably have already been to this facility. It's a great bird's eye view of the new turf field at Glover. The far field upper left is Ritchie Bell, which is the only grass spot left there, but the main field itself is fully turfed. It's our main varsity field, Salamini Field, and it's also been lined for 5 other sports. So we're really excited to have just the flexible use of this space, and it's getting tremendous use by our community already. The final picture that we have for you, although it's not the final project, but it's the final photo, is of the work that has begun at Prospect Hill. You may remember here we're building a double door security entrance because Prospect Hill is our only school that currently does not have that double entry. for security. So it's be an expansion on the side of the building built to match the current style. We'll have double door entry, greeter station, conference room, and actually, again, because the project has been running on schedule and on budget, we were able to add within the scope and still within the budget a whole second story with an additional classroom. So this will be outfitted for an additional classroom space because we know that there have been enrollment growth in the community. So just to the left of the picture there, you can kind of see the stairs. Just past that, what you can't see is about an 18-foot drop where they excavated out down to the foundation to put in the footings for the new expansion. So that's actually progressed quite a bit since this photo. We're keeping the dirt on site because it's apparently very good dirt. And we are going to be renovating the Prospect Hill field this summer. So the dirt will stay there until such time as we need it to level out the grade on that field, and we'll do that work this summer. This project is slated to be completed around the end of the calendar year, maybe a couple weeks into the new year. It will also include an elevator so that the building is ADA accessible, and renovation of the student bathrooms so they as well are ADA accessible. And the final project, which we don't have a photo of, but I will mention, is renovations at the high school campus. You may remember as well that we're at full utilization there, and part of the bond approved the renovation of the district offices into classroom space. So our business office has already moved off campus into the 314 Pelhamdale house next to Colonial Elementary. That's been fitted out now for offices, so they have moved. This summer, the remainder of the offices will move off-site into rental space within the town of Pelham. So we're in the process of identifying and negotiating that lease, which you will see in the budget this year as well. And the work has already begun now on the campus. What used to be the curriculum and special education offices has actually been gutted, and that will become 2 brand new high school art rooms by the fall. Also by the fall, we anticipate the new science research room and physics room to be completed, as well as the new orchestra room, which will be located near the current band and chorus rooms. Additionally, there will be about 6 more classrooms done by probably by December of this year, which will provide a new classroom design for our Foundations of Learning high school class, special education life skills room, as well as room for a Bridge Academy and 4 additional classroom spaces for general purpose use. So we're really hoping that that helps to ease a little bit of the space capacity issues at the high school. To get back to the budget, couple things that helped us with the budget, helped in areas of savings, as well as items that tended to drive costs this year. So on the savings side, it's always bittersweet. When we have retirements, we're really sorry to see these folks go because they have become such a part of the Pelham family. They have incredible expertise and historical institutional knowledge that leaves with them, but it does give us an opportunity to bring in new folks at lower salaries. So that helped a lot. We had extremely favorable collective bargaining agreements with both civil service clerical unit as well as the Teachers Association last spring. They recognized the economic climate and the potential devastation that was coming to our country, our state, our community. And so they were very willing to come to the table and make significant concessions, even though this has been the hardest year of education and work for all of us within the system. Really appreciative of their willingness and understanding in this climate to do that. We also had this year seeing some reduced BOCES tuition costs, which just due to shifting student need. We often will send students to BOCES either for special education programs that we don't have in-house or for their career technical programs at the high school level. So we had a slight reduction there. We also were fortunate to see some sustainability in utilities as we worked to add new controls to our HVAC systems in many ways. And then also we got really favorable results from the Westchester County sales tax, that new 1% that we're all paying. There actually was more revenue produced by that even during COVID than what we anticipated. Areas for increased costs within this budget, as I said before, it's going to be the recurring theme of the story of this budget is increased debt service related to the capital projects. We also this year experiencing about a 4% healthcare rate increases in both the employees and teachers retirement systems. So that's something that we certainly budgeted for. Additionally, within the budget, as I mentioned earlier, our reliance on technology has increased significantly in the past year and a half, increased infrastructure, hardware, and software. So we're at the point where we need more human resources to support that increased technology. So instead of hiring someone directly into the district, we're going through BOCES to hire an additional instructional technology specialist to support our infrastructure. And by going through BOCES, one of the huge benefits of using BOCES, in addition to the benefits of shared costs, is we do get a revenue stream back the following year. So generally, depending on the service, we'll get between 40 to 50% of that expense back the following year as a revenue. So we're going through them for this particular position. And as I mentioned, there will be a rent had needed to be built into this budget for the administrative offices. Go right on to the next. So our revenue budget is predominantly, as I'm sure folks watching this know, is 84% based on property taxes. So we thank you, and we continue to be appreciative to the community for your continued support. If you look at the adopted budget from this current year that we're in now versus the proposed budget for next year, you see it's an increase of $1.6 million in actual revenues from property taxes. And that's where we get the 2.4% change in the tax levy, is that $1.6 million increase. We're very fortunate this year to get a 10% increase in state aid. Those of you who've been involved in our advocacy efforts, you know that we've been asking for the state to fully fund us in foundation aid. We've been funded at about 51% for a number of years. And this additional state aid moved us to 60% funding, and the state is committed to fully funding districts over the next 3 years. The tricky part about that, though, is we recognize that the additional state aid, which is ideally a recurring revenue from foundation aid, is actually being backed by federal money. So most districts are taking a very conservative approach to how they're using that, because we don't know the long-term sustainability of those funds, given that they're coming from the various rescue packages that have come out of COVID. So with the additional funds that we got, there was about $800,000, just over that. We are using those to reduce our reliance on our reserves. We're maintaining the reserves for use in the future to protect us against volatility. But we are appreciative for that state aid money. We're going to keep an eye on that long term. A couple decreases in the other remaining areas. But we did, again, you will see here the appropriation of debt service reserve. So as I said earlier, the way that this budget was constructed is a 2.47% levy increase. It's because of this line here, the appropriation of debt service reserve. If we had not allocated anything from that reserve, we would be looking at a 5% levy, allowable within the tax cap levy increase, based on, again, our base budget and our capital exclusions. In the initial version of the budget that we presented to the board, we recommended $1.1 million to be allocated from the debt service reserve, which would have brought the allowable levy down to 3.31%. When we presented that to the board, they had a significant debate about exactly what they wanted this budget to look like this year, and especially given the year that the district has gone through, the community has gone through with COVID, felt that was still too high of a levy. So they directed us to add an additional $500,000 from the debt service reserve, and that's what brought us to the $1.65 million use of debt service reserve. I should say, with that, paired with that though, the debt service reserve does have a little bit over $2 million in it. So this does not fully deplete that reserve, and that was an important part of the conversation. They didn't want to make a short-term decision, but a short-term benefit that still had the long-term perspective in mind. So while 6.65 is being allocated in this budget from the debt service reserve, that still maintains $444,000 in that reserve for use next year, because we do know there will be a final step up in the bond borrowing, or in the bond debt next year. So as we promised to the community back in 2018, when we proposed the bond and passed the bond, we knew that it would be the onset of the bond costs would come on over a couple of years, and we wanted to use that reserve strategically to make sure that it was a gradual step up instead of a significant jump. So we've done our best to be true to that, and that additional funding is available there for use next year. If we could go to the next slide, please, and the next. So as I've said, within the tax cap legislation, as long as our budget is within the levy limit, which it is, we only need a simple majority to pass. So 50% of those who come to vote plus one. And we are doing in-person voting this year. And as I said, it is at the middle school. And we are actually still allowing as well absentee balloting. So there's been a significant number of that amount of those coming in, but we're excited to be back voting in person. If this budget were to fail, we could put it back out as is. We could put it back out amended and for another vote. If it failed the second time, we would then be required to go to a contingency budget, which means we would not be able to raise the tax levy, which means that 1.6 million in additional costs budget to budget that I pointed out in an earlier slide would need to be cut. So 1.6 million would need to be eliminated from this budget in that case. If we can go on to the next. So just to give you a ballpark of what this means to you, and this, again, this presentation is available on our website under the Board of Education budget section, in case you want to look more closely or digest this a little more carefully. We always like to give an estimate of what this means for the homeowner. So the top example is if your house's assessed value is just over $500,000. Next is just under $1 million. Bottom is if it's 1.375 assessed value. And then you look to see how much your assessment changed from year to year. Was it 2%, 4%, or 6%? And then you can get a rough idea of what this budget will mean to you as far as an additional tax bill. This does not take into account the balance between homestead and non-homestead, so there certainly would then be adjustments there as well. But it should give you a rough ballpark idea of where the increase will impact you. And then looking to state aid, we've mentioned some of this, but just a few points to point out. Again, you see there the additional foundation aid that we got at just over 800,000. One thing that is not reflected in this budget, because we're not allowed to put it into the operating budget or reduce the levy with it, is the additional federal funds that we got from the American Rescue Act. It was about another 800,000 total. That is one-time money, one-time infusion of funds, not recurring. And it is to be used specifically for things related to COVID. So learning loss, and potentially additional staffing to fill temporary needs, tutoring, things like that. So what we're thinking at the moment is we still don't know at this point if we're going to be required to offer fully virtual instruction in the fall. We're hoping that the climate is such that we're able to go back to all full in-person instruction and move back to really more traditional approach. But if we do need to hire fully virtual teacher, well, if we have, let me start that over. If we need to provide fully virtual education for students, especially at the elementary level in the fall, we learned from this year that the better approach is to have full-time virtual teachers. So we likely would use some of the funding for that. We're also certainly assessing the social and emotional toll that the pandemic and being at home and remote learning has had on our students, and would look to use some of that funding to provide additional social emotional staffing and support for the year. Again, both of those being temporary approaches. So something we could use that funding for. Potentially additional tutoring in the fall, additional summer programming if there's an increase in need above and beyond what we've already planned for. So that's it, where the initial thinking is around that money. But again, you don't see that reflected here because it can't become part of the general operating budget. Building aid, we did see an increase that was forecasted based on our aid runs as predicted in the past. We did have a small increase in BOCES aid, and that we related back to expenditures from last year. Decreases in a few other categories. And the last item I'll point out is the Federal CARES Act and the pandemic adjustment. This came from the first federal rescue funding that went straight to the states. And then the states passed that on in different ways to different entities. And for us, what that meant is they actually cut the state aid they would have provided to the district by just about 85,000, but then filled that gap with new federal funds. So they plugged the hole, they kept us even, no harm, no foul for this year. But again, we recognize that is not necessarily a sustainable funding source. So, so we're gonna keep our eyes on that. If we can go to the next slide, please. And the next. Just some appropriations, and I didn't fully touch on these. I definitely touched on debt service, but just to highlight a couple others. Every year, most districts use this strategy. They will allocate part of the surplus from one year towards the following year's budget. So we are continuing to do that as we have in the past. We had originally proposed allocating 655,000 from this year into next, but given that additional foundation funding, we in wanting to reduce our reliance on reserves, we are not allocating as much. So it'd be 450 from this year's surplus into next. We also reduced our reliance on the retirement reserves, and are not allocating anything this year. But then again, you see the big allocation of debt service fund reserves of 1.65 million, and again the intentional usage, keeping 444,000 in there for usage next school year. And when we get to the expense side, we are a human resources organization. We are mostly made of people. So that's where the bulk of our expenses go. About 85% of our costs go to, 75% go to personnel. So salaries, employee benefits, et cetera. I mentioned earlier that we had favorable collective bargaining agreements, and you see that salary increase there would have been more than double that had we not had as favorable agreements. So again, we're very appreciative to our units who worked so collaboratively with us there. You see some additional changes, contractual. Some of those costs went up just a bit. That's everything from copier repair service to professional development services, landscaping, et cetera, anything that we have a contract for service on. BOCES services definitely showed some increase, and a lot of that is an intentional shift, strategic shift of items related to technology, not necessarily the hardware, but really the softwares, things like that, a lot of technology costs. So going through BOCES so that we can then recoup the aid in the following year. Interfund transfer reflects certainly both the debt service expense, debt service reserve spending, as well as the new spend that we have to cover that, the new debt. So when you put that together, that's 2.5 million of the overall $3.5 million dollar to dollar increase in this budget. So you can definitely see where the bulk of that is coming from as the main driver of the 4.67% budget to budget increase in expenses. Decrease in materials, increase in tuition when if we need to, we don't have a program that is appropriate for a student in district, and BOCES doesn't have that program. We also have the option of sending them through the Committee on Special Education to another district if that may have a better suited program. So we did see an increase in budgeting there, and a little bit of increase in textbooks and equipment. And that's what gets us to our 3.58 million increase in expenditures this year, which is the 4.67% budget to budget increase. We can go on to next. We're also an educational institution, so the bulk of our costs could and should come from instruction. So about 74%, anything that touches the instructional program, be that the teacher, the supplies, the pencils, anything in the classroom is captured there. Administrative costs have to stay 10% or below, and that's where things related to people like me, custodians, clericals, et cetera. And then of course, capital portion captures those capital costs, the ins and outs of the expenditures that are related to capital. And that's grown a little bit over the years, obviously, because of our capital expenses. So when you put these side to side, you can see that we do have a balanced budget. On the left gives you the revenue sources, mostly the biggest to smallest, with our debt service listed there at the bottom. And then on the right-hand side, you have the expenditures, and you see an even bottom number. And that brings us back to where we started. The total appropriation going to the public on May 18th in the middle school gym is in the amount of 80,280,000. Budget to budget, we talked about a 4.67% increase, predominantly based on expenditures related to the 2018 capital projects. And we then have the allowable tax levy increase of 2.47%. And with that, Alex, thank you so much for jumping in and giving us the visual. I am going to, we're going to stop the presenting, and that actually concludes the budget presentation portion of this evening's presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. We will have this video posted out as well if you want to review it again or share with folks who couldn't be here with us tonight. And again, a reminder, and we invite you to stay on the same YouTube channel because in about 10 minutes, we'll be beginning the candidates forum for those candidates, 5 candidates running for 2 Board of Education seats. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you on May 18th in the middle school gym.
again. Okay. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Pelham PTA Council, I would like to welcome you all to the 2021 Board of Education Candidate Forum, and I thank you very much for attending. My name is Beth Blanc. I'm the president of the Pelham Council of PTAs. Before I introduce our esteemed moderator, I would like to introduce our timekeeper for the evening, Christopher Blanc, sophomore at Pelham Memorial High School, and my son. Christopher? Okay.
Oh, you'd like me to
Shy
speak?
tonight. The PTA Council is live streaming this event on the Pelham Schools YouTube channel. It will also be available for viewing via the link found on the district's website under the Board of Education tab. Now, please allow me to introduce the Honorable Eileen Nadelson, former New York City judge and our moderator for the evening, provided by the League of Women Voters of Westchester. Eileen?
Thank you, Beth. It's a delight to be here. I am currently the president of the Northeast Westchester League, which is the northern five towns in the northern section. We make up Bedford, Lewisboro, Mount Kisco, North Salem, and Pound Ridge. That's where, and under the rules of the league, none of the moderators are supposed to have any connection or relationship to the town for whom they are moderating, and I have no connection to Pelham, so we cleared that hurdle. That takes care of that. So tonight we have 5 candidates that are vying for 2 seats on the Pelham School Board. All right, I'm going to give you their names and then explain the structure of the forum tonight. We have Eileen Miller. This is in alphabetical order. Eileen Miller. Hang on a second. Because I lost the list, that's why. Okay, here we go. Eileen Miller, Michael Owen McShane, Janice Powers, Ian Rowe, and Jess Young. And there are 2 seats, there'll be 2 seats available out of those 5 candidates. All right. Before the audience came on tonight for this production, we took a lottery on who was going to go first, the order of the presentation. And you will see that as it comes up, the first one is going to present is going to be Jess Young. And I will, from there, during the questions, I will rotate from, sequentially from each candidate to the other, so that no one candidate has to go, is the first one to go with each question. The whole idea, of course, you don't have to remember that, I do, but the idea is to keep it as even-handed as possible so that everybody has the opportunity to present. All right, and now the time frame, this is the structure. The candidates will go in the order of the lottery ticket that they chose, and the opening presentation will be 1.5 minutes. That's 90 seconds. The questions that come after that, they will have 2.5 minutes. All right, and then the closing is 30 seconds. By the way, closing presentations are in reverse. So the first lineup that we had for presentations, it goes backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, and that's pretty much the structure of tonight's forum. Now, there is a timekeeper, as you saw, and we adhere very closely to that time frame. That's, again, the whole idea is to give each candidate the same fair opportunity to present to the issue that's being presented and in the allotted period. So if you're running over the time period, this is for the candidates. If you're running over the time period, it's not because I'm rude, but I'm going to interrupt you if you go over. And just shut down when it says time's up, okay? And now I think we've said everything we have to do for setting the program in motion. And with that, we have like over 40 questions. There were like 41 questions that were submitted by about 24 community members. And we combined and coordinated some of them because they were of similar nature, and also to make sure that we could cover as much of the issues as possible. So they're pretty in-depth questions. The candidates will see that they are pretty in-depth questions. So if you need to have something repeated, you can do that for me. And with that, we are ready to go. So the first person who's going to present, number 1 from the lottery ticket, is Jess Young. And the first three questions are going to be from the PTA Council itself. And here's the first question from the PTA Council.
Should I do my introduction first?
Yes, Eileen,
Yes.
we needed Jess to make her candidate statement. 90 seconds,
90 seconds.
1.5 minutes to introduce herself.
Yes, exactly. That's what, oh, I am so sorry.
Okay.
I jumped right over that. You're right. You're absolutely right. My mistake. Yes. So let's have Jess Young introduce herself.
Okay. Thanks, PTA Council. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Eileen, for hosting us tonight. I'm excited and a bit terrified, but I'm going to focus on the excited part right now. So I'm a current trustee on the Board of Ed. I've been in Pelham about 8 years. I'm a Hutchinson parent and soon to be a middle school parent. I'm running for re-election to the Board of Education to continue my work and leadership of the Bond Steering Committee, ensuring that our capital projects are approved by the voters in 2018 move forward smoothly and on budget. I'm running to represent my Hutchinson community. I'm the only candidate and BOE member from Hutchinson and feel it's important that all parts of our community are represented on the board. I'm running in support of all of our students, the overarching goal, working to ensure our students feel welcomed, supported, respected, and challenged to reach their own individual goals. There's a learning curve on the board, and I feel I'm hitting my stride, having gained tremendous experience managing unprecedented and challenging situations in the face of the pandemic. I understand the commitment of the position, and I'm excited to continue the hard work ahead as we bring our students back into the building full-time and ensure we are supporting them emotionally, socially, and academically through this process and recovery. It's hard to remember sometimes in the middle of election or a pandemic that I do this work because I enjoy it. It's challenging and it's hard, but I believe in the work we are doing to make our schools welcoming, challenging, and really excellent places for our students. Our students go on to do wonderful things in the world, and providing schools that help them grow and learn and find their own path to success is what I'm excited about. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, number 2 in our presentation for opening statements will be Ian Rowe.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to PTAC and the League of Women's Voters for arranging this event tonight. My name is Ian Rowe. My wife Sylvia and I have lived in Pelham nearly 10 years with Oscar 9 and Camille 11. Background on me is that I'm a graduate of New York City public schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. Brooklyn Tech High School, I earned my degree in computer science engineering at Cornell University and my MBA from Harvard Business School. After HBS, I joined the staff at Teach for America and later worked in senior roles at the White House and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I've dedicated my career to public education. For the last 10 years, I ran a network of public charter schools, pre-K through 8 in the heart of the South Bronx and the Lower East Side of Manhattan. 5 schools and more than 2,000 students with a $50 million budget and nearly 5,000 kids on the wait list. Under my leadership, we implemented innovative supports for students with a wide range of individualized and special learning needs, especially at the elementary school level. I also oversaw the $30 million design and renovation of an 85,000 square foot building, so I'm quite familiar with building excellent facilities. We're running partly because last year, my wife and I made a tough decision to take our third grader out of Siwanoy because we were dissatisfied with the board-approved hybrid plans. But we did leave our daughter in middle school, but we don't want any parent to have to face that choice. I'm running now to lend my expertise to the board to plan for full-time, everyday, in-person instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. All right, number 3 is going to be Eileen Miller for presentation.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Thank you very much to PTA Council, the League of Women Voters, and Pelham residents for all being here tonight and hosting us. I'm excited to have this forum tonight because I am so proud of our board, and I can't wait to tell you about the great work that we've done. As I look forward to answering questions about my future and the seeds, or the school's future and the seeds that I've planted that will continue to drive excellence in all aspects of the district. During my first term, I served as a board trustee enthusiastically and with tremendous work ethic. I am confident that my experience during this unprecedented time uniquely positions me to continue working productively for another term. I led the district during a once-in-a-century global pandemic with no spread in our schools. I led the development of our strategic plan that is going to ground our district decisions for years to come in the voices of students, teachers, and our community, and I've led responsibly and without bias throughout. Going forward, I will prioritize the voices of our students and strive to help them make connections which will further a culture of inclusion and protect our youth against mental health challenges. And I'll be doing this all with the same commitment and authenticity that I've proven in my first term. I'm asking everyone to listen tonight with an open mind. These elections are specifically nonpartisan, but it's really hard not to jump to conclusions given the world around us. Please listen and decide who you think is most ready and qualified to lead immediately on day one, because there is a lot of work to do. I'm confident that my experience with the board and town speak for themselves.
Thank you. Number 4 to present, Janice Powers. You're on mute, Janice. You're on mute.
PTAC and families of Pelham, thank you for this opportunity tonight. In 2013, my husband and I made a commitment to this community. We purchased a home and resolved to raise our daughter here in Pelham, New York, to give her a first-rate public school education in a close-knit and safe community. We love this town on site. There's so much beauty here, but we also saw that there are some challenges and there were some changes. Never one to shy away from either, I resolved to dedicate my time in service to helping make our town a welcoming home for all residents. I want my daughter to say as an adult, I grew up in Pelham and it was great. I also want to give to others what was given to me. I focus on education because my teachers in my life saw my potential and nurtured it. Their care and support allowed me to visualize a successful future and find a sense of belonging and civic responsibility. Our district is committed to a 5-year strategic plan that runs through 2024. It was formed through deep community engagement. It is student-centered in its priorities of cultural competence, authentic learning, and care of the whole child. It is the right plan for our community at the right time. If elected, I will roll up my sleeves in collaboration with others to deliver on its full promise. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final candidate for presentation is going to be Michael Owen McShane.
Thank you. I am so excited to be coming to you live from my bedroom. Here's the headline. I'm running for the Board of Education to help with COVID-19, to listen to parents, and to focus on academics. My name is Michael Owen McShane. I live in Pelham with my husband, Maurice, who's right over here, and our 4 kids, a 3rd grader, a kindergartner, a preschooler, and the baby who just started crawling. Clearly, I'm committed to the Pelham schools for the long haul. I first started thinking about running for the board when Dr. Champ asked for help from medical professionals with the challenges of COVID-19. I'm an internal medicine doctor and assistant professor of medicine at Columbia University Medical Center. I'm offering my medical knowledge to help keep all of our schools operating safely during the coming year and make sure that every student who chooses to can attend school in person, full time, full day, 5 days a week. But I don't just want to help with COVID-19. I also want to listen and advocate for parents like you. I was very troubled that it took a petition from more than 500 parents to get the board to take action on a reopening plan. It shouldn't take petitions to get your board to listen. Finally, Pelham parents care about academics. That's why we choose to live here. As your board member, I promise to be laser focused on high academic achievement for every student. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we will move on to the question period. And the first questions that are coming to the candidates come from the PTA Council itself. And I'll start with the question number 1. We're now moving sequentially to the number 2 position. Number 2 is Ian Rowe. So you will start with answering this first question, Mr. Rowe. This is for all of the candidates to hear. What would you bring to the Board of Education? What subcommittees would you like to chair and to serve on? And what volunteer experiences have you had, either within the Pelham School District or within the town of Pelham, which has prepared you for successful service on the Board of Ed? Ian Rowe?
Yes, thank you for the question. So if you look at most boards in any type of organization, there are typically people on it who have deep expertise within the relevant sector. That's so the board can both be a support and a check on the leadership. If elected, I would be the only school board member with more than a decade of experience actually running a network of public schools. Why is that important? Well, one thing that I decided to do during this campaign is to review the publicly available board minutes for the last 3 years. I discovered that the Pelham board held more than 80 official meetings, and even excluding procedural motions like adjournment or approval of board minutes, still conducted more than 400 votes. A review of the board minutes on the Pelham site indicates that more than 400 votes were approved unanimously, typically 7-0 with no recorded dissenting votes. What's strange is that a 6-1 vote still passes, and so does a 5-2 or a 4-3 vote. I very much understand and appreciate the need for consensus, and I also think it's great to support the administration in their important work. But this string of 100% unanimous decisions in lockstep with the administration suggests that the board has to provide more of an oversight role. And I feel my background especially equips me to do that well. In terms of my volunteer work in Pelham, I've been a coach, I've been Boy Scouts, but I've also been on the board with Session, which is Huguenot Memorial Church, which is the equivalent of the board. And so I'm quite proud of the work that I did with my fellow board members in an important institution in Pelham. And then finally, on committees, and because of my background, I think I could be quite an effective board member on the audit committee, the authentic learning committee, the cultural competence committee, the facilities committee, the community education, the community engagement and advocacy committee, the policy committee, because I've had such wide experience actually running schools and actually being on a school board. So I've both been in the role of reporting into a school board as well as been on a school board holding leadership accountable. I really think I could add value. But in terms of which roles, I'd really want to sit with my colleagues and what are we all interested in doing? What are the areas of expertise? What are the areas of interest? So I'd really love to collaborate with everyone else to figure out what would be the final positions.
Thank you. Next to speak is Eileen Miller on the same question.
Thank you. I think this is such an important question and gives me a great opportunity to share what I think is particularly important in this election. I bring experience to this Board of Education. I've done this job for 3 years, and they have been some of the most tumultuous years of recent history. Anyone who has served on the Board of Ed will tell you that regardless of your experience coming in, the first year is a steep curve. July 1st for me will be just the next day of working hard for this district. I hit the ground running and I just keep going. The subcommittee that I'd like to continue to serve on is the Advocacy and Community Engagement Committee. I'm assuming I'm just gonna keep on with my other ones too. I've spent a lot of time on advocacy over the past few years, and I feel like my experience meeting with Westchester County and state level officials is really valuable. I've learned how to best harness their support in ways that are most effective because I understand what they can and can't do, as well as leverage our vocal community members to make our small town heard. My success as a board member has come largely from my extensive volunteerism in the community in leadership roles. The list is long, but I've led the book fair at Colonial, sat on the middle school site-based council. I was the president of the Library Friends for many years, and I've been on the Pelham Education Foundation. I've met and formed relationships with people all over this town of all different thinking and perspectives, and I incorporate all of that into my thinking to best find a way to represent everyone.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker, Janice Powers.
So I can bring commitment to Pelham students, which has already been demonstrated through my work on the Pelham Education Foundation for the last 3 years, where I work collaboratively with multiple board members to evaluate and ascertain ways to augment student academic experiences, where we handle a budget and determine our funding priorities. I also showed my commitment to Pelham schools through my volunteer work in Bridges of Pelham, in the Siwanoy PTA, as newsletter editor, as chair of the diversity committee, and in so many other ways, including speaking at Career Day and interviewing on parent interview panels to assist the district. I would also bring character and integrity. My entire career has been built on these principles, I'm a public servant. I work for the New York State Office of the Attorney General. My long-standing advocacy for every resident of the state, from as far as Sullivan County down to Westchester County, and my work as a former prosecutor demonstrates my ability to work with a spectrum of different personalities and individuals. I've worked with domestic violence victims, and I've argued before federal judges. I treat everyone with respect and not in regard to their title, but their humanity. I also would bring my legal wisdom in terms of the facet of the board in regards to hiring and promotion and tenure. I've dealt with retaliation cases, due process violations, First Amendment violations, and I can identify policies that leaves the district exposed and could invite litigation. I also have years of negotiation and collective bargaining experience that I think is highly valuable when dealing with our teachers and their union. The subcommittees I'm most interested in are the Wellness Committee, to maintain and implement programs to determine the best practices for the social and emotional wellness of our students K-12. I believe that emotional balance goes hand in hand with academic success and focus. And I'm also very interested in the Cultural Competence Committee. You know, this committee was formed with the input of over 6,000 responses from this community. And the top priorities were more diverse curriculum, more diverse and culturally proficient staff, and treating students based on their character. This work is still in its early stages, and I believe it's also interrelated with our students who have special learning requirements. So those are the two committees I'm most focused on, but I believe I can bring talent to all committees.
Thank you. Okay, and we end this question with Michael Owen Michelle.
I first started thinking about running for the Board of Education when Dr. Champ asked for help from medical professionals with the challenges of COVID-19. I'm an internal medicine doctor and assistant professor of medicine at Columbia University Medical Center. Some of you may wonder why it would be good to have a doctor on the Board of Education now. Like you, I want to believe that COVID-19 is over, but one of the main lessons I have learned from the past year is to expect the unexpected. I believe COVID-19 has more twists and turns in store for us, and I can use my medical knowledge to help navigate the challenges that we still face in the coming year. I will use my medical knowledge to keep all of our schools operating safely during the coming year and prioritize keeping every student who chooses to in person, full-time, full day, 5 days a week. I also will bring a sense of urgency to keeping kids participating safely in sports and extracurriculars. Two areas in particular where I can help will be with quarantines and vaccinations. Many of you probably experienced quarantine periods and switching to full remote learning due to quarantines. We all remember at the beginning of the year when the whole district went remote just prior to the first day of school. At that time, we were told that the decision to close was based on health department guidance. Later, the district clarified that what the health department actually said was that they would support whatever the district felt like doing. Unclear guidance from the health department leaves our school leaders in a very difficult situation. As your board member, I will use my medical knowledge to help understand and implement local and state health department recommendations. Unfortunately, there will definitely be cases of COVID-19 among students, staff, and faculty in the next year. Quarantines must be based on science and also recognize that overly broad quarantine orders are very disruptive for students, teachers, and parents. Another area where I can help is with vaccinations. This Monday, the FDA authorized use of the Pfizer vaccine for kids 12 and up. There have also been news reports that vaccines may be approved for elementary age students by the end of summer. This is a fast-moving area. As your board member, I will help navigate the changes and complexities involved as more teens and children are vaccinated. I will help the district anticipate obstacles and find safe, creative solutions.
Thank you. And I almost forgot that because Jess came right around from being number one. She's now number 5. So we're up for the question to close this question will be Jess Young.
Okay, yes, thank you for not forgetting me. So the first thing I bring to the board is experience. I've been on the board for 3 years, and with this experience comes a lot of knowledge. I know how the budgets work now. I've worked through the push to bring our students back to full-time in person, and we've worked really hard to position the district well to continue this work in the fall and have all of our students back in our school buildings. Really, regarded to the knowledge about the bond projects and the progress, I'm the one board member that has the most history on this work and most intimate knowledge of this work. I've developed relationships with the architect and with the contractor, and I know what's happening there. I'm the primary contact when issues arise. I review this with the business office and with the district and report back to the board on what's going on. I also bring representation for the Hutchinson region of town. I think this is important because we are a big one community. And if we want to have all voices heard as we move forward with difficult issues, there should be representation from all parts of town. I'm a collaborator, I'm a team player. I work well in small groups, and I enjoy doing this work. For the committees that I've worked on, I've been the chairperson of bond steering for the last 3 years, and I would like to continue this work as we finish up the capital improvement projects from the 2018 bond. I also think I would work on the facility and fields committee. Potentially these two committees will merge together as we go forward, and there isn't a need for the bond steering committee. I've also been working on audit. This is a big learning experience for me. I don't have a financial background, but I've been learning a lot from Trustee Mazzaro, and we have some excellent community members on the board on that committee. So I really enjoy it because it gives us the opportunity to provide a quality control of our business operations. And that's something that I'm used to doing in my role as an architect, making sure that things are right and are going to work. You don't want your building to leak. So I think my service has demonstrated in the past term on the BOE really shows my volunteer experience that I've had. I was also on the bond steering committee before I joined the board. I've demonstrated my value through this work, and I'm also a soccer coach, was on the board of PCC, became involved in the community as soon as we moved here when my daughter started attending PCC, really. So I joined that board immediately. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to question number 2, which comes from the PTA Council also. And this time we're going to start with the number 3 position, Lotto, which is Eileen Miller. And here's the question for all of you. An important role of any board member is to collaborate and keep the board moving forward on all issues. Please share an example of how you will foster progress on projects that you may not personally support, and speak to your ability to collaborate with your fellow Board of Ed members. Eileen, you begin.
Okay, thank you. My ability to collaborate with the fellow board members is extremely high, and it's proven because I've been doing it for the last 3 years. We all speak from our own experiences and perspectives, and we don't always agree. But we respect each other, and we trust each other to bring equal levels of thoughtfulness and commitment to all questions. For example, we recently discussed how to proceed with high-risk sports for the spring season. We all had different opinions. We came from very different perspectives, and ultimately we collaborated and came out with a very successful decision. At the end of the day, we have to be able to move forward, and that requires us to collaborate. With respect to fostering projects, we're all professional and we are doing what's expected of us on the board. There may be a project where we have more or less personal interest, and we may have to negotiate our way through different opinions. But that's not totally relevant to getting done what needs to get done. We are always able to get to a solution.
Thank you. All right, so next on this question is going to be Janice Powers.
Okay, thank you. When you're serving a community, I think there's several key factors to collaborating and moving forward on all issues. First, you have to keep the community at the center of the issue, and determine things like, how would this impact our students? How much will this cost our taxpayers? If there's a point of contention, that's an opportunity to gather more information and come back to the table. In addition, I think it's key to remember that the board works as a body. It's not about one particular individual. And so your individual desires, needs, or viewpoints oftentimes, I should say, have to take a back seat to the greater good. I think just remembering that it's not about the individual and it should be made on informed decision making based on facts, information, and data. And also just have a respect for your colleagues on the board, being an empathetic listener, but also a flexible thinker. You may think you're right initially on one point, but given the consideration and respect to others and the open-mindedness, you can be more flexible in your thinking and come to a point of consensus. But I think the greatest reminder is just make sure that you remember who you're serving and who you're there for. And that will keep things moving ahead.
Thank you. All right. Oh my gosh. Hold on a second. The next person to speak is going to be Michael Owen Mashane.
What is the role of a Board of Education member? This is one of the biggest questions of this election. Some people believe that the role of a board member is to be an enthusiastic supporter of the school administration. I believe the role of a board member is to exercise active oversight of how our kids are being educated and speak up when there is room for improvement. It's not enough just to keep the district moving forward. We have to make sure we are moving in the right direction. This is what New York education law says, what the New York State School Board Association says, and what the policies of the Pelham School District say. But you don't have to take my word for it. Think back to your American history and civics teacher. What would your teacher say is the role of an elected official? Isn't it to listen to voters and advocate for the changes voters want? As your board member, I promise to listen to parents, the Pelham community, and taxpayers, and speak up on your behalf. I am very grateful to our teachers, custodians, principals, and staff for all they have done this year for our kids. I know Ms. Diano and Ms. Ralston showed the highest level of commitment and love for my son. I am so grateful to the reopening task force for their tireless work on behalf of our kids. And I'm grateful to the board members and Dr. Champ and the administration for their hard work. Clearly, no one signed up to take on the enormous task of running schools during a pandemic. This winter, I was very troubled that it took a petition from more than 500 parents to get the board to take action on a reopening plan. I was also very troubled when it took another petition and the threat of a student walkout to get the board to take action on returning high school seniors to school full-time for their final weeks in the Pelham schools. I'm also concerned that the board refuses to respond to parents' questions at meetings and that there's a lack of substantive debate about the important issues our schools face. When it comes to listening to parents and providing oversight, I think there is room for improvement. As your board member, I will always listen to your concerns and I will speak up when I see room for improvement.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Jess Young.
Okay, hi, thank you. So I do agree. I agree that collaboration is key to a successful board. I also believe that coming together to make united decisions on difficult issues is critical. We want to put forward a united front on these issues so that we send a clear message to the community about what we want to do. I have to say I'm not the loudest voice on the board, but that means I'm listening. I hear perspectives of the fellow trustees and the students and the administrators, and I ask questions when I don't know enough about something so I can better understand the issues. And after hearing those perspectives, I will voice my opinion, since my first thoughts on any given issue may not have been tempered by the input of others. And I think it's really important to take in all that information before you move forward and start to discuss the issue. As far as an example where I didn't personally support what was happening on the board, I think full-time in person is a good example of that. We moved to bring our kids back into school full-time, and we were opening their schools, in time with our neighboring districts as well. I heard the input and concerns from the parents who wanted all the kids back full-time. My own daughter was thrilled with the idea of going back to school every day. But I honestly was still scared when as a board, we made this choice to go back in. I wasn't vaccinated. The teachers weren't vaccinated. My community at Hutchinson had more families that were not attending school in person already, and they were going to be faced with this impossible choice about going back or staying full remote for the rest of the school year. I was comfortable with the hybrid model, and we hadn't had to quarantine our daughter due to exposure yet. So all that was about to change. However, I listened to the experts in our reopening task force. I listened to the parents, and I listened to the plans that the administration was putting forward. And we asked a lot of questions and tried to see how they could change them and make them better. And I heard the excitement that they brought to this, and knowing that it was the right thing to do for the students, it showed me that this was the way we should go. And so now I'm very proud that we made that decision, and I'm happy, but it was a difficult one for me to make at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to close up with Ian Rowe on this question.
Thank you. So the board definitely has a lot to get done, and it is imperative that its members be able to work together collegially, even in the face of disagreements. I have a deep history of collaborating with all kinds of people around this country and in this town, and that history has been recognized even here in Pelham. I'll share one example. In February of 2019, the co-chair of a very active political group in town reached out to ask me to run for a town trustee position because, as this co-chair said, I think you would be, quote, amazing in that role. What do you think? You would have the support of this organization behind your candidacy, end quote. And I responded, I'm honored that you're thinking about me. The challenge is that there's so much ideological opposition that I can't really align myself, but it's a real bummer because I actually desperately want to find ways for all of us as a community to have more civil discourse. When it's us against them, we all lose, and that end quote. And this co-chair wrote back to me, thank you for considering it and writing such a thoughtful response. It's so unfortunate that you can't run. I understand why, but you would be such a good candidate and a great trustee, end quote. This person was right. I would make a great town trustee, as I believe I will make a great board trustee. I share this because being on a board is a non-political position, but it seems like everything today is so political. But I'm the same thoughtful bridge building person today that I was in 2019 when this party would have backed me. I share this because the sphere of a local election in Pelham, from the sphere of this to this morning, where I was invited by ranking Democrats and Republicans to testify to the US Congress Joint Economic Committee on closing the racial wealth gap, I've built my career on bridging differences with people, regardless of their political or ideological stances. In this campaign, I've modeled to my community how I would behave as a board member and foster progress. I put together position papers. I publicly respond to questions from parents who want public accountability. I will bring that same approach to being on the school board if elected, and I really hope for that opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving to the third question from the PTA Council. And the person who's going to begin with that is going to be Janice Powers. And so here's the question for all of you. What do you feel are Pelham's deepest challenges in the next several years? And what will be your approach to addressing them?
Thank you.
Janice Powers?
Thank you. I think the challenges that are facing our school district are the same challenges that are facing suburban school districts throughout this country. And that is how to meet the needs of a continuously evolving student and parent population. Here in Pelham, our student body reflects the diversity of our nation in terms of socioeconomic status, in terms of family structures, language proficiency, learning abilities, ethnicity, and race. What our students face at home is also being visited within the classrooms. And I think to handle these challenges, we have to develop clear policies on how to address them, and also keep a mindful eye towards how we can equip our teachers and staff and administrators through guidelines and support, even if that means hiring aides within the classroom, and resources to help our teachers meet the needs of our students where they are, while helping them focus and bring them across the threshold into academic success. I think the reason it's imperative to address these challenges and not ignore them is because our schools are highly ranked, not just locally and countywide, but also nationally. And if we do not adjust to the changes in our student body and the needs of the student, especially in light of, the challenges in the outside world, we'll find a difficult time maintaining our high rankings, our high academic prowess, and preparing our kids even for their careers, for entrepreneurship, for higher learning, and just for being adults in the world. And that's what I think the main challenges are and how to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are done with the PTA questions, and now we're moving into the community questions, which came from members
Oh,
of.
I don't think I answered that one.
Eileen, yes, we have more to go.
Oh, I missed
Michael,
somebody?
number 2. Mhm.
Number 3. Oh, sorry about that. Michael Owen McShane, you're up.
Thank you. The core mission of a school district is education. As your board member, I will make sure that the district stays focused on high academic achievement for every student. Pelham parents care about academics. That's why we choose to live here. Both of my parents are retired public school teachers, and I inherited from them a commitment to high quality public education. My education has allowed me to give opportunities to my kids that I never had. As your board member, I promise to be laser focused on high academic achievement for every student. Because as parents, we know that academic success is the key to opportunity for our children. Many parents know that our district has a strategic plan, but I don't think many parents know what's actually in our strategic plan. The plan contains very important things like cultural competency and supporting our kids' social emotional needs. These are critical areas of work. But I'm concerned about what's missing from our school's strategic plan. High academic achievement for every student is missing from the plan. You don't have to take my word for it. I encourage you to go to pelhamschools.org and download the strategic plan. Type Control F on your computer and you can search the whole plan for academic achievement. Spoiler alert, it's not there. Academic achievement is literally missing from our strategic plan. I don't want to take away at all from the important parts of the plan, but I do believe that academic achievement must also be part of the plan. If we're not planning for academic achievement, I'm worried we're not going to get it. And when I say academic achievement, I'm not just talking about straight A students. I also mean students with learning differences who must get the services and support they need to also have high academic achievement. And I also mean the majority of kids in the middle, the solid B students, and also the kids who may not be into science and math, but excel in the arts and humanities. The common theme is that all of our students must do the challenging hard work and see their hard work pay off. That is true success. As your board member, I will be laser focused on high academic achievement for every student.
Thank you. Now, before I go any further, because I'm missing out on some of these speakers here, is there anybody I missed for the number 3 PTA? Did I skip over some of you?
Eileen, we have Jess next, then Ian, and then Eileen.
Ah, got it. Okay, I am skipping into the community questions too fast. All right, thanks for Beth Banks keeping track of that. All right, so we just heard from Michael. The next person that we're going to hear from then would be Jess Young, correct?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, go to it.
All right. So I think that there are 3 challenges that I'd like to outline that are facing the district. The first is supporting our students socially and emotionally as they come back to school full-time in person. All the students are going to adjust differently to these issues, and it's going to be on different timelines and in different ways. So they need to have supports. They need to have trusted adults identified in their school building whom they can go to with the concerns. And if a child has anxiety or any other acting out or any other reaction to the change, time should be taken to discuss and understand the challenges that individual is facing so that supports can be put in place for that child. We have programming such as responsive classroom, and I think we should also have some town halls discussions at the school level so that these issues can be talked through. In our last board meeting, we appointed some contracts for special education services for on-call issues when we need more support, and that's one of the first steps we're taking to address these issues. The second, we are work to address DEI. I think as a board, we developed our strategic plan in 2019 with direct input from our community and the voices of our students. So how we make progress on the goals of cultural competency and authentic learning must be based upon local conversation, listening to and hearing what our students have experienced and what they need. Recently, the New York State Board of Regents adopted a policy statement encouraging every district to have a DEI policy in place. The goals outlined in our strategic plan and the work of the Cultural Competence Committee to this point put us in a great place to have this developed. And this will probably be the first actionable item on DEI that we can do in the future, in the near future. The third, which I think we're facing, is our aging facilities. 4 of our 6 of our buildings are approaching 100 years old, which is kind of cool because this fall we're going to celebrate 100 years at the high school, and there's a great celebration plan. But I believe my professional experience as an architect gives me a unique position to help maintain a capital improvement plan, which is a 15-year look-ahead plan to anticipate repairs and upgrades to our facilities so that we can keep our spaces for learning safe and secure for our students. We want to be able to budget for this in our annual budget and not have to go out for another bond to do major repair works on our buildings. So these are the 3 issues that I think I see ahead.
Thank you. All right, Ian Rowe, you'll go next.
Thank you. So there are definitely a number of challenges that Pelham faces in the coming years, but for me, the #1 challenge facing the school system is board transparency and oversight. This came to my attention when I recently spoke at a February board meeting after publishing my critique of the equity audit. This was the rule that was read aloud before public comment began. Quote, "Neither the Board of Education nor district administrators will be responding to comments nor questions during the public comment session." End quote. Let me read that again. "Neither the Board of Education nor district administrators will be responding to comments nor questions during the public comment session." End quote. I was really stunned when I heard those words. These are elected officials. So consider that we as Pelham residents, we take the time to go, we have genuine questions and concerns about something going on in the school system. We miss dinner, we go to the meeting and we ask a question. And it's stone-faced response. That's unacceptable. That is not how we want to operate as a board and a community, a board of elected officials. What was strange in my situation is that I had had incredible, great private conversations with the administration about the very same topic of the equity audit and a robust back and forth. But now in public, they couldn't engage on the issue. As parents and taxpayers, our board owes us transparency and the ability to be heard in public and to be responded to in public. Private conversations do not equal public accountability. Private conversations do not equal public accountability. If elected, I will try to encourage my colleagues to return to transparency in terms of public real-time dialogue. There are a number of challenges: how to reopen full-time, diversity in hiring, expanding the curriculum. But if there isn't confidence that the board is responsive and is even willing to publicly engage their constituents in all of these issues, then the board is not fulfilling one of its key duties to us as taxpayers and to its duties to kids that we all serve.
Thank you. And closing up this question for the PTA number 3 will be Eileen Miller.
Thank you. I think that our deepest challenges as we look forward in the short term first and then also in the long term are in the areas of interrupted learning and the mental health of our young people. I'll start with interrupted learning. It cannot be overstated that this last year was incredibly challenging on all of us, and our students have missed out on entire units of study. At the next Board of Ed meeting, we will hear the district's plan for gaining that back next year as fully as possible. I think we will need to hold the district accountable to do is to figure out which of the things that were missed are most critical to the building blocks for the following year and prioritize those. Additionally, we are going to have to support our teachers. There are teachers who've been teaching their grade for years, and they go in with the understanding of what their kids, the new kids coming in, know. And that is going to be completely upended this year. I think that we need to provide support to them to how to fit in that missing information. Most importantly, this needs to not be considered learning loss because it's not lost. The district just needs to make sure it's only delayed, which I have 100% confidence they'll be able to do. Mental health issues were growing before the pandemic, and we are seeing them rise and expect that trend to continue. The district has already begun hiring temporary personnel to fill in some of the work that relies less on established relationships in order to allow our full-time mental health professionals the time to continue to serve the students with whom they do have relationships. I would continue partnerships with outside organizations like the Civics and Pelham Together, for whom I work, to supplement efforts in the schools and start planning group talks and events to provide support to students and parents for the years ahead. And some of you may have heard of a new program that I would support as an effort to bring the elementary students together earlier on to better support the transition to middle school. I believe we should use Wednesday afternoons for group work across the district, creating cross-elementary teams to work together all year long on meaningful projects so they can know each other in real ways and not rely on assumptions, and create connections that will then help them navigate the tumultuous middle school years.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to move into the community questions now. And we're going to begin with Michael Owen Mashane. He'll be in the first slot this time. And we touched on this a little bit before in the question, or in the answer, I should say. But here's the question from the community. What are your thoughts on the Board of Education and district administrators' policy of not responding to questions during public comment at their meetings? The Board of Ed is the only elected body in Pelham with this policy. Citizens often pose questions where answers are of interest to the broader community, yet the Board of Ed chooses to respond to these questions privately. Please comment on this policy and how you will work to improve communication with the public in the future. And we're going to begin with Michael Owen Mashane.
Thank you. Yes, as you heard, their rule number 4 of attending a board meeting, which I haven't been to too many other public meetings where I get a list of rules, but I guess that's how it works. Rule number 4 says that no board member will answer any of your questions or respond to you. Now, I've been to board meetings myself, and I went during the time that we were trying to get our schools reopened with a statement that I wanted to read, a statement about my little girl, Abigail, who's in kindergarten, and the impact that this pandemic and remote learning has had on her. My daughter's a bright and sweet little girl, and I saw when she is on remote learning, her bright eyes go dull. She does just not developmentally able to participate for more than 5 minutes. And I wanted to speak about my daughter. When I got to the point that it was about to be my turn and I realized I was going to be ignored, I felt like my daughter deserved more respect than that. It feels very disrespectful to the community that board members don't answer or at least acknowledge people's concerns and questions. And of course, we know that in our community, this has resulted in multiple petition drives. I don't think it's right that parents had to come to a point of absolute desperation that they had to have a petition to please ask the board to start working on reopening our schools. I believe in American democracy. I may be one of the last ones that still does, but I do believe in American democracy. I believe in open discussion and debate. And I think that you actually get better results that way. That's not just my opinion. If you check the New York State School Board Association member handbook, They recommend that if there are disagreements, they be discussed openly because that leads to better results and builds consensus. It also avoids the bad feelings that come about when people feel that they're being ignored. As a doctor, I know when people are upset, you have to listen. You have to hear and understand what they're saying. And I, as your school board member, I pledge to always listen to parents and advocate for what parents, the community, and taxpayers want.
Thank you. And next in line to answer this question will be Jess Young.
Hi, thank you. So since I've been on the board, this has been the policy. This is what it's based on. This is our policy for public meetings, and how we respond to the questions is through a response over email. Either Dr. Champ or the board president will respond to the issues. I understand the frustration. I know that on these things, I was involved in a lot of board meetings when the bond project was happening. I attended every single board meeting that year, and I spoke several times. And what I did know is that the board members do hear what you're saying, and you can see in their other board operations and in their next coming meetings how they've taken in that information and how they're processing it. So I think it's not easy to respond to some of these questions right in person, and I think it takes it's an option for the board to have a chance to consider what this means, how we might want to discuss, bring forward something to discuss about this and make a change that would be helpful. And that's how it's been, how I see this issue working. And I don't know that those responses in the meeting would be helpful. We might not have an answer to a specific question, and it takes time to get that information. I know this also from being an architect. Like, I'm not an expert on anything, but I know where to find the answers. So that's sort of how I view these questions, is we have to hear them, and then we have to get the answers and give you, the community, the best answer we can. And that's not going to be the first thing that comes out of my mouth. So it's going to be something based on more information than that.
Thank you. Ian Rowe, you're up for the next.
Well, thank you. Well, as you heard from my prior comment, I do think this is a very serious issue. But let me say, I actually do have empathy for the board on this. Again, I've run schools as well as I've been on a board, so I know the challenge of answering questions in real time without complete information. But the answer is not to tell your constituents that the elected officials are simply not going to respond. That creates a lack of transparency. And so I really try to think about, so why would the board have this position? Because it's clearly not something that helps the residents. Again, private conversations does not equal public accountability. So why would they do this? And so if you think, wow, they're not taking questions, they're taking questions, but they're not responding to them in public. And then you pair that with the fact that over 3 years, 80 meetings, 400 votes, not a single recorded dissenting vote, you start to get the impression that there's such a commitment to be this quote unquote united front that it actually suppresses the opportunity for us as a community to understand what are the real issues. It's okay to disagree. We can have reasoned public discourse. And I just get the sense there's this idea on the board. No. We cannot show any disagreement, whether it's in our votes or even in public session. I think that's unhealthy for a board, and it is not delivering on the responsibility to provide oversight to the school leadership.
Thank you. Eileen Miller is up next.
Thank you. The first thing I will say, obviously, I've been on the board for the last 3 years with Jess as well, is that it is a comment period. It is not a Q&A. I feel like the board has done its due diligence in doing what's supposed to be happening during the meetings. It's a very common practice among school board associations. I understand that's not the case for the town, but we're not the same as the town. I think that what Jess said is absolutely on target, that sometimes we have no answer in that moment. We also, in the event of a dispute that we haven't fully discussed, we're going to need time to work through that and negotiate with each other and come to consensus. Nobody is being silenced. That is not what's going on here. Also, any questions that are answered, absolutely 100% of them get follow-up afterwards. There are other vehicles for Q&As. I know that it has been a difficult year and there hasn't been as much of this, but there are copies. The principals have copies. That's an opportunity to ask questions. There are other meetings that happen that invite questions and get answers. You're always able to reach out by email. There are definitely private phone conversations, but that's probably not what people are most looking for. But emails are always responded to. I also want to address this issue that keeps coming up about the 7-0 votes. And I hope that there's another question coming about it so that I can talk about it further. But let me be clear that while the vote is certainly the last thing that happens in any issue, it is 100% not the most important thing. The important work happens earlier than that. It happens as committees consider different issues, whatever they are, and they work together to come up with solutions that get presented to the board. And then the board is able to have opinions and send comments back to that committee. All of that ends in a vote. But by the time it gets to the vote, it is 100% vetted and discussed and done so publicly because assistant superintendents use their updates to talk about that, as well as committee members. The boards sit on a lot of different committees, so we are involved. So I just wanted to set that record straight.
Thank you. And closing this up on this question is going to be Janice Powers.
Thank you. I think a few key things need to be clarified first. New York State school law does not require a public comment period. It only requires that school board meetings are open to the public. So I think the fact that here in Pelham, we establish consistently a public comment period shows the interest in hearing from the public. The other consideration is that there are various mechanisms of communication. There are the thought exchanges, the BOE hosts coffees. I mean, pre-pandemic, obviously the pandemic made that a little difficult. There is an email address that goes right to the board. And I know from preparing for this race that people in the community speak to their board members in the supermarket, they call them on the phone, sometimes have 1 and 2 hour conversations. So is there a perfect system? No. Is there room for improvement? Yes, but I don't think it's fair to say that they're not interested in the public. This is a very engaged town, and this is not the kind of community where you can ignore the voices of parents, thankfully. In addition, if someone makes a public comment at a board meeting, to me, that goes back to the fact that the board has to work as a body. It's not for me to jump up and start reacting and responding, especially when I don't have the information. If it's a curriculum question, I might want to go back and speak to Maria Thompson, the head of humanities. I might want to speak to Dr. Garcia, our assistant superintendent of curriculum. And then I can go directly back to the parent, get more information and give them answers. However, we do have a community advocacy subcommittee with the board. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying to them, revisit your policies. Is there anywhere we can fall short? I don't think the pandemic is the example, however, that we should look to, because all of our communication mechanisms were truncated during the pandemic. But I think we should remember, what kind of community this is. There are engaged parents, we have a committed board, and we can work together to expand communication, but I like to keep a realistic picture.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to question, second community question. And leading off with this will be Jess Young. So here's the question. Can you highlight one point for each of the pillars of the strategic plan that you are most passionate about, and how you will help to develop and execute the plan as a member of the Board of Ed? Jess Young.
Unmuted. Thank you. So the 3 pillars: authentic learning, cultural competency, and the whole child. On authentic learning, this one, I think there's 2 parts that I'm most am passionate about, I think, which would be some of the curriculum programs for authentic learning, such as the Facing History program that was piloted at Colonial. Like, I'd really like to see those programs implemented across all schools. And I think related to that is something that's also been discussed tonight, is improving that experience of K-5 schools and the exchange between the schools. Like, this authentic learning and real experiences between students from different parts of our community before 6th grade, I think is really important. Being an architect, I want to add a second one here, I think, which would be about the furnishings, the new 21st century furnishings that we're putting in at the new Hutchinson School and that we've piloted in all of the different, in every school around town as well, especially in the libraries. I think this is a great program, and the Pelham Education Foundation has helped us with this purchase. So I want to make sure that we budget and continue to provide that at all the schools so all the students can experience that flexible learning experience. Cultural competency. I think the biggest important thing there is student voice. We need to listen to our students. We need to seek feedback from our students. We need direction from our students and involve them in discussions, because they are the heart of our school. And I think that they're also a great resource to look towards for help with the DEI work that we're doing in our schools and in our community. The last one, whole child. I think the work that we're doing for the establishing a system of evaluation, the multi-tiered system of support, is a great program. And I know in the budget, we're allowing for larger organizations of MTSS staff to communicate and share how their evaluations are working. And I think this program is great because it, evaluates students regularly and for academic issues and make sure they're getting the support that they need at a tiered level. So it can go up and down to make sure that they're in the least restrictive environment possible, but they're getting all the supports. So that's my 3.
Thank you. And next is Ian Rowe on this question.
Thank you. So, I mean, there are a number of great areas. I mean, I'd choose cultural competence. And in fact, I'd even choose the objectives associated with the Pelham equity audit. As I've said, there are a lot of good reasons for why we did the audit in the first place. It's very important to occasionally have an outside body come and answer questions about school culture, student experience, climate, disparities in certain outcomes. So I think that's all really wonderful. I just think that the organization that was hired by the board did a really bad job. And unfortunately, in some ways, colored all the good things that can come out of an equity audit. But I very much support the efforts around diversifying the curriculum to make it more inclusive, really to diversify the workforce in terms of viewpoint diversity, race, other ways to create a really pluralistic, great, diverse workforce. So I think that's a great area of opportunity. It's just that how it was executed, I think, was initially faulty. But moving forward, I think we can really go collaboratively together to accomplish these objectives.
Thank you. We're going to go now to Eileen Miller to answer this question.
Thank you. So I'm going to tell you which is my favorite part of each of the 3 pillars, but I'm extremely proud of the work that we have done on the strategic plan, and I'm deeply impressed by the progress that the district has already made. So starting with authentic learning, I am very passionate about bringing more authentic experiences, like real hands-on learning, to the district. There's a program in the high school that I would recommend expanding, which allows students to get a job internship program. It's called the WISE program, but they are still supervised by an adult to help them, to support them really as they enter this adult world and make sure that they have all the tools to be successful. I would support the rollout of the IB program to 9th and 10th grades. I think those capstone projects are amazing, and it forces kids to work together to solve real world problems. I think as in the at the elementary level, I think that the best thing to be done with authentic learning is as much hands-on integrated work as possible. I would specifically support the type of learning that has been built into the Hutchinson School. So small areas where after the whole class has come together, smaller groups can go off and work together or have one-on-one time with the teacher and then come back to the main group to share with each other. I think this kind of learning keeps our youngest students engaged, which is really the whole point of it all. So cultural competence, of course, if anybody's watching any of the board meetings, you know that this is my passion, and it's hard to just pick one, but I would have to go with the student equity leaders. I think that anything that's done for students by students is instantly more powerful. We have amazing teens in this town who want to do great things, and we've started to create brave spaces for them to really share their truth and find ways to overcome some of these barriers. And that kind of work, I think, is really important going forward. For the whole child, my passion here is around mental health. The additional supports that we've put into the district at every level, the DBT program in the high school, psychologists at every elementary school, they're making an impact every single day. I would continue to support those efforts and also work to create connections with the outside groups, Pelham, the civics and Pelham Together that I mentioned earlier. And I feel like I'm best ready to support those.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to Janice Powers.
Hi, may I please have the entire question again so I can answer it?
Sure.
Thanks.
Can you highlight one point for each of the pillars of the strategic plan that you are most passionate about and how you will help to develop and execute the plan as a member of the Board of Ed?
Okay, thank you. So I think opportunities exist for the Board of Ed members to help with the work through the subcommittees. I'm actually passionate about all three pillars because I think it's a really beautiful strategic plan that can help any child meet their full potential. Regarding authentic learning, the sorts of things I would like to see remain, but also new things I would like to see come in place with the focus of giving kids real life experience is to bring in guest lecturers in various fields to help educate students on how to fulfill a career goal. We did this recently at Siwanoy with the help of our PTA presidents, our diversity committee, and also a parent who was very well connected in the community to bring in an aerospace engineer who had a kind of like troublesome academic career initially, only to essentially figure out that she was a math genius in her high school years. And she explained to the kids that journey, and that's like real life practical experience that kids can take with them forever. I also like the flexible furniture approach under this pillar because I think a classroom that can like pivot and change so that kids can work in groups or work separately, I think is more aligned with the work structures that we're seeing in normal office space pre-pandemic, where you are working in a kind of flexible office setting. I also like to see places where we do develop more internship opportunities for our upper grade students and also greater access to competitions to help them develop skills outside of the classroom. With the whole child, the social component, I'm a big advocate for any program that can connect children in the elementary grades, especially from 3 to 5, getting together. I've talked about Pal programs where they have a pen pal and they write on a topic. Invite in other schools when we have, outdoor events, hopefully past the pandemic, where if we're doing something interesting outdoors at Siwanoy, invite some kids in different grades from Colonial or Hutch or Prospect. And as for cultural competency, I mean, this is at the heart of my life and what I do and what I've done here in Pelham for the BIPOC parents through my work in Bridges. And I think, we have to be reminded that our community invested in these pillars. We had thought exchanges, we had a lot of input, 6,000 plus ratings on cultural competency alone. And what I would like to see there is ways to bridge the gap between the population and the teachers.
Thank you. And closing up this question is going to be Michael Owen Mashane.
Thank you. Yes, for those who don't know, the 3 pillars of our strategic plan are cultural competency, whole child, and authentic learning. In terms of cultural competency, I feel like our immediate attention needs to be on acts of bias in our school. we've heard about acts of anti-Black bias and anti-Semitic bias. I want to make sure that all of our students are directly instructed that these acts are unacceptable. All Pelham parents can agree that racial slurs, racial jokes, and other acts of bias have no place in our schools. And I want to make sure that our students are getting anti-bias training and promoting a sense of kindness and respect for every student and employee in our schools. I also believe I was very troubled when reading our equity audit about the sense of bias against the Hutchinson School. And I think this is something that is not a huge surprise. I think a lot of us have heard this in the community or felt it. And I sincerely hope that the new Hutchinson School building changes this. And I would ask each person listening, as President Obama says, sometimes you have to be the change. And I hope that we can all commit to stamp out the bias against Hutchinson School once and for all. Next, in terms of the whole child, I am very glad that our school district has implemented responsive classroom and the dialectical behavioral therapy, and I think that's very good for our children's mental health. I hope that we have a chance to talk more about mental health, but I just want to say as a physician, there are things that our school district just cannot handle. That, you know, our district cannot address all of a child's mental health needs. If you are concerned about your child's mental health, I strongly urge you to contact your pediatrician and ask for a referral to a child psychologist or child psychiatrist. And I strongly recommend the Columbia University Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders. They do excellent work. Finally, in terms of authentic learning, I've heard from a lot of parents whose children in the high school are participating in science research, and that's great. Of course, I love science research, so I'm a big supporter of that, but they sometimes have trouble if your parent isn't in a network finding a mentor. And I would love to see a speakers program to bring in active scientists that our students can develop connections with that could lead to internships and research projects.
Thank you. All right, we are moving on to the next question. Leading off with this one will be Ian Rowe, and here's the question. Incidents and stories shared directly from Pelham students all point to the same problem, an environment both within and outside the classroom where students frequently experience speech and acts that are hostile to those who are different from the norm of the community, such as differences based on race, religion, country of origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, etc. Do you feel that the equity audit is improving our school district or causing division? Do you think that the NYU Steinhardt Center was properly vetted, and should they have been hired? That's quite a mouthful to say for a question. All right, so Mr. Ian Rowe, you're up.
It works much better when you take off mute. So as I just said in my earlier question, in my earlier answer, there are a lot of reasons to do an equity audit to identify just the kinds of things that you're talking about. We don't want a school system where any child feels based on immutable characteristics or any other characteristic that they're being bullied or that they're uncomfortable. And so having an outside organization in some systematic way really get the pulse of kids, faculty, parents can be enormously valuable. So it's a very, very, very important process. You know, as I said, I think NYU Metro Center, their work is grounded in critical race theory. I think they're determined to divide people up by race. You know, critical race theory, in their definition, you know, requires for us all to view the world through a racial prism, where if you're white, that must mean you're privileged and you're an oppressor, and otherwise you're just in some big blob with these marginalized categories that you're marginalized or you're oppressed. And you know, my daughter is not marginal. My son is not oppressed. And we don't want to have an organization come in and start to create these labels, because in some ways that exacerbates the very things that we're trying to avoid. We can't fight racism We can't fight bigotry by spreading more bigotry. The way in which we deal with these things, we have to start with grounding principles, equality of opportunity, individual dignity, common humanity across race. That's what we want to instill in our children and our adults. That's the behavior we want to model to help kids understand that you have to view each other as human beings first, not in these demonized categories, which sometimes outside organizations actually help to perpetuate. In the Pelham equity audit, in my view, they actually perpetuated negative racial stereotypes around Black boys when they said the suspension rates were 4 times higher than they actually were. Those are the kinds of negative stereotypes that actually drive negative behaviors. Equality of opportunity, individual dignity, common humanity across race. By really focusing on those grounding principles, that's how I think we bring our community together.
Thank you. Eileen Miller, you're next.
Thank you. This is a really interesting question because of the conversations that we've had over the last few months. Cultural competence has started, or the work on cultural competence started years ago in this district. It's a continuing process. It will never end. We all are totally ready for that. And the equity audit is one piece of it. We had done other work that was a much slower process, frankly, to get to finally reach any kind of impact. And we all agreed that we felt like we needed something to happen faster, particularly after the events of last summer. So in doing that, Dr. Champ got recommendations from a number of other school districts like ours, high achieving school districts in BOCES Collaborative, which says that BOCES is completely comfortable with schools using them. So I feel very comfortable with the organization having done the work because it's part of a larger effort. Also, we handed over tons of information to NYU Metro. It wasn't just their own research. It was data that we collected in the school district, from which they also did focus groups. And I know that people are concerned about the numbers of people in those groups, but those are voices. Those are real people in our schools talking about what they lived, their lived experiences. And I don't feel uncomfortable listening to those. I feel like that's our requirement. As far as have they created division? I think that they've created division among the adults, but the only effect that's going to be on the students is to improve the culture of inclusion. They have, one of their recommendations was around hiring practices, and representation matters. For kids to come to school and see somebody who looks like them, that is proven time and again to lead to better outcomes. So the recommendations, as we've said 100 times, are just recommendations, and the board will decide what we move forward to do. And I look forward to presenting to the board from the Cultural Competence Committee later next month.
Thank you. And next up is Janice Powers.
Thank you. There are a couple of points I'd like to make on this topic. First, I'm surprised that all of a sudden we're treating NYU like it's I've never heard of you university. I mean, NYU is a respected academic institution right here in our state. The other thing is everyone, well, the adults, are emphasizing the equity audit and what problems may exist in it. Years before the equity audit, Bridges of Pelham came into existence. I just wanted to meet some friends and connect children. But in learning about people in our community, our social group turned into educational advocacy, where we've honestly had one too many meetings with the district about the use of the N-word against our students with consequences. All these students don't walk away unscathed and just shake off the fact that, oh, I was called the N-word today. It's not like it's no big deal. Some kids are actually suffering and having real detrimental side effects. So I don't need the equity audit to tell me what's been happening in our schools, because I've been living it for the last 4 years. Now, my daughter, her life is great. She's in 2nd grade. things are beautiful for her at Siwanoy, but this is not about me. This is about the entire community. And if there are children in this community who are telling you that they're having a hostile school environment or they're being bullied regardless of the category, and that is preventing them from focusing on school or trusting their peers and teachers or staff, that has to be addressed. So whatever flaws or faults, others may see with the equity audit, go right back to the community, go right back to the students. You don't want to listen to the audit? Listen to Pelham Laundry. Listen to the students who spoke at the anti-Asian hate rally. Listen to the students who spoke at the summer rallies after George Floyd got killed right here in Pelham. Listen to the parents and Bridges of Pelham. So let's just deal with the fact that we have an issue. Is it everyone? No. But this is a public school district, and we have a duty to create a non-hostile school environment where our kids can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. And closing it up, Michael Owen Machine.
Be loud when you're not
Mhm. I'm-
This is a wasp and I want to kill it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I equity audit several times.
Sorry, it's not you closing it up, Michael. It'll be one more speech.
Okay. Yeah, I've read it several times and discussed it with many parents. And it is very troubling to read. No one wants to hear about acts of anti-Black, anti-Semitic bias and other acts of bias against other groups. As I said, I believe that the entire community would agree that racial slurs, racial jokes, and discrimination against any group of students or teachers is absolutely unacceptable. I do think that going forward, it would be helpful to remember how we started on the platform of cultural competency with the thought exchange. And for those who don't know, at the beginning, the school district asked parents and others to submit their thoughts, what they had in mind, what their vision was, and we all voted on them. And I want to share the very top thought that was shared, and it's this: judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Dr. King's wise words are something that the whole community. That was the thought that was voted to the very top. And I think that there is wisdom there and a guiding principle. That's what our community wants to move forward with. And I think that's important to acknowledge that this community is committed to an anti-racist approach in our schools. But I think it should be grounded in the vision of Dr. King. And I also want to speak about the equity audits comments on COVID-19. And I am very worried that the biggest equity issue right now, urgently in our community, is the effect on COVID-19 on our students. And we need to make sure that certain students have not fallen behind, especially the BIPOC community. As a physician, I know that Black and Hispanic patients were affected much more by COVID-19. Finally, I do want to say I have heard from parents that the climate in the school has become extremely political, and many students feel uncomfortable. I think we need to protect our students from the anger of social media and cable news. The way to empower our students is to educate them. That is how our students can become leaders, and we need to focus on education in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're closing it up actually with Jess Young.
Thanks. Okay, so I do think that the equity audit has caused some division, but that it should be really seen as a tool to help us improve these relationships. And I think it's the adults that are seeing the division in this. As a board, we have to take in all perspectives and reference, and the equity audit is just one of these many sources. This work was started, as Eileen mentioned, with the Cultural Competency Committee and our strategic plan long before. So having an outside opinion and a perspective, such as an equity audit, is helpful. And it's actually a usual step used to evaluate and consider the efficacy of an organization and your process. So being a responsible board, we ask for this outside opinion when there's something important to review. But this is the district's plan for DEI, and it'll be just that. It'll be our plan. We're going to expand on the cultural competency work that we've outlined, and we'll use the information from NYU to make informed decisions and make our plan as we move forward. So critical race theory is an academic way of looking at racial disparity. It's not a program or agenda that can be implemented into our schools. Our focus as a board is on student voice and on DEI issues that are local to our school. So as long as our work remains focused on our students, the next steps are unlikely to be based on an academic theory, which doesn't provide solutions. The work that we need to do is on us. It's on our community. So as the Cultural Competency Committee reviews the audit in more depth and considers how the recommendations might be applied to our local needs, the board will discuss this. This is coming up to us, I think, in a meeting very soon, hopefully. And from there, we will determine the next steps. We'll define the progress goals based on the student needs that have been identified, all the feedback that we got from the students for that Cultural Competency Committee in the first place. So as a board member, I will continue to encourage communication and understanding around DEI issues. As parents and leaders of our community, we must model these basic behaviors. I'm not an expert on how to do this work, but as a board member, I really want to do this work. I believe in our students and their commitment to this. And so I'm also open to any ideas that they have if what they're saying will help make all our students feel welcome and safe and respected in our school community.
Thank you. Okay, we're going on to the next question, and leading off in the presentation will be Eileen Miller, Eileen Miller. And the question is, as our COVID numbers decline, and we look forward to September, what would you do to ensure that the district addresses all students' needs at all levels?
Thank you. I think that we can all be quite sure that COVID will still be with us in the fall. That's the overwhelming opinion that I'm hearing. At the very most basic level, we are going to need to have kids wearing masks. We are going to continue to have all of the air circulation benefits that we have now, and the classrooms are going to be safe places to be. But I think that the physical health and safety is going to be improved by the fact that there are a lot more people getting vaccines now, and hopefully at some point all of our students will be vaccinated. But vaccinations are not going to help the social emotional needs of our kids. They're coming back. They're coming back now, which I think is a great start. And then the summer is going to come, and people are either going to be here or they're going to disperse. They're going to have whatever experiences they have, and then they're coming back in the fall, knowing that they missed out on some of the coursework from last year, likely going to have to be shoved in a way that is faster, than it would normally be. And kids are going to have to be just attended to in all kinds of ways by our school psychologists, by outside organizations. I want to remind everybody that Pelham Together has a vast trove of resources on their website, but more importantly, the district works very closely with outside organizations to make sure that we have supports that are available to kids, because it's true that the district can't do everything. I think that parents are going to need help knowing how to manage the anxiety that comes out of this massive change back to more people and more spaces. I think that the older kids are going to be going through their own things also. There are plenty of kids who find it stressful to go to high school, and they've been able to be home and not have that stress. And it's going to come back in full force in the fall. And I really feel for those kids, but I do think that it's something that we have dedicated support staff to address, and they're going to notice the kids who need help, and they're going to help them.
Thank you. Following up will be Janice Powers.
Thank you. When I think about the fall, one thing that I'm most focused on is how we can help the students with these rapid changes, back to school, lockdown, hybrid, virtual. I think there are a lot of systems in place that could possibly keep us open full time, but we obviously have to be prepared for what's to come. We don't know what mutations or anything is going to visit us in the fall and in the coming years. So I think it would be great to see prioritization of things like virtual teachers. So when students are at home, whether it be hybrid, fully virtual, or maybe a sick day, there's a teacher who is able to interact with that student directly. So the in-class teacher doesn't have to pivot or make a choice between the students present in the classroom and students who are at home. I also would like to see some way to either hire more clinicians per building, if not like full-time, but maybe under some sort of like independent contractor type of approach, or at least provide referrals for parents whose children are suffering with anxiety or any other condition that's related to the fact that we're expecting, especially the youngest kids, to just pivot. I'm at home with mommy and daddy for 8 months, and now I'm back to school and half of the kids I've never seen before. Some of these children are not going to be able to just emotionally transition into that sort of change. I'd also like to see prioritization on things like after school tutoring or after school enrichment programs. When I was a high schooler, I went back to my middle school and I did after school tutoring 2 days a week. And I think that's something that can help kind of keep the academic flow for a lot of students, and also help those who or maybe are not getting the full support they need, between all the different models that are now available to us. I think for children who have different learning abilities, we really have to sit down and think about how we can serve those students, because especially in a hybrid or home-based model, what are we losing in those children? That's a place we really have to investigate and come up with a plan. And finally, for our higher achieving students, what can we do to make sure they're not bored, or, ways to challenge them and keep them more engaged, with whatever, challenges are ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Owen Mashane.
Thank you. Yes, so as we move back to the fall, I think, first of all, I am totally committed to finding safe, creative solutions to getting all of our students back in school full-time, full day, 5 days a week. And I think we do need a little bit of creativity, especially on the high school front. When I've asked questions and looked into things, I feel like so many times there are things that just don't totally add up, that we're not actually using all of our space. And I think there are solutions that we can pursue to get our high school students back in school. Also, I want to address the issue of mental health. And I think, first of all, maybe I'm an optimist, but I believe that our children are resilient. And I think the majority of kids are going to be okay. They are going to transition back to school and they're going to do good. And I think our teachers are very good at building community and a sense of well-being in the classroom. And the work that's been done with responsive classroom and the other techniques that are in use is very good. I have to say again, as a physician, if you are worried about your child's mental health, you need to talk to your pediatrician. I think we have to recognize that schools can only do so much. And we can be making referrals to psychologists, to psychiatrists to help our students. I was taking care of COVID patients from the beginning in the hospital. The scariest day for me was seeing the impact on my children's mental health. And there was a day that I had to make an emergency call to my child's pediatrician. And I'm very grateful that we got help from Dr. Stephen Mazza and Dr. Rebecca Grossman at the Columbia University Clinic for Anxiety and Related Disorders, called QCARD. And I really urge people, if you are concerned about your child's mental health, you need to call your pediatrician. And finally, I'll just talk a little bit about learning loss. So I know many parents have contacted me very confused and concerned by the messaging from the district about state tests, sort of discouraging people from taking tests. Parents want accurate, timely, transparent information about their children's academic progress so we can see exactly where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is going to be Jess Young.
Okay, so I think as we talk about COVID in the fall, The biggest thing we need to do is continue to remain flexible. Like Dr. Champ likes to say, we have to hope for the best and plan for the worst. And I think, you know, what we can expect is adjustments in regulation, like more increased vaccination availability and availability to younger and younger kids. And that will change some of the regulations. We don't know how that'll change them yet and what that will mean for how crowded the schools can be and what feels safe and what is safe for our parents and teachers. But, you know, we had to be flexible with all of this over the summer. And we did. We had many meetings since last March to plan and adjust and readjust our plans as the regulations kept changing. So I think we will continue to do that. I do not expect it to be a quiet summer for the Board of Education. There will be lots of meetings that are not usually on the schedule, just like there were last summer. So I think there are other big issues, the academic learning loss and the social emotional that other people have touched on. And I want to point out, you know, we did receive this $800,000 one-time payment of federal funding from the American Rescue Plan. And this is money set aside specifically to assist with COVID costs. So this can help us provide services for students as we negotiate this return to school. So this could be additional clinicians, tutoring programs, lots of anything that we need, we can use this money for. And so I think on the academic loss, you know, we've heard Dr. Garcia talk a lot about the state test recently, but he also talks about how we are evaluating our students. And we have internal programs that our teachers use, like such as the AIMSWIM program, that give the teachers information that we feel is more accurate than the state tests, which were significantly reduced. My daughter came home from the math test today and was like, that was like 5 questions. It was so easy. Okay, I've got no more time. Okay, so I think we have opportunities and ways to evaluate our students, and we will use that in the classroom and make sure that we're addressing those where we see those losses. The opportunity for the Summer Stars program can also expand, and we will be contacting, the district will be contacting people who are eligible for that. Social emotional, I've talked about a little bit, but I know there'll be varying speeds and needs of every student, and I think communication is key with this. Parents need to talk to their teachers and make plans. Thank you.
Thank you. And closing this up will be Ian Rowe.
Well, thank you for this question. I mean, we all hope that there's a lot more known once we all return to school in the fall. But the truth is, there are going to be a lot of unknowns. And one of the things I think that's so important to recognize is that we are not alone. In that there are challenges that school districts across the country are facing. And one of the things that I've built over the last 10 years running schools, I have colleagues who lead whole systems, private schools, parochial schools, charter schools, traditional district schools. We've got almost kind of a best practice network. And so we learn from each other. How are you dealing with issues at elementary? How are you dealing with developmental appropriate issues at middle school that are different from high school? How are you dealing with anxiety? I think it's really important that we not isolate ourselves and recognize that there are many, many people struggling, but there's some amazing things that are going on around the country in different kinds of schools, and I can tap into that network. And so that's something really, really important that we can learn, and Pelham can be the recipient of lots of best practices as well as share out. The other thing I think is really important, especially as it relates to social emotional issues, is that we really have to have this idea that there's no one size fits all situation. You know, when I ran the network of schools, especially at elementary, we did a lot to really hone in on what are the individualized needs, what are the special learning needs for each kid. Sometimes that could take the form of child study teams where we had different social workers, teachers, parents, sometimes the kid themselves to be engaged. So really trying to build a support system that's really honed in on that individual kid. And something we may want to do even in August or even earlier maybe is have earlier parent-teacher meetings so that a teacher can sit down with each parent and say, how's your kid doing? You know, as we begin the year, what are the kinds of supports? And you can only do that on a one-on-one basis, but we may want to make a huge investment in the very early part of the year for one-on-one sit-downs with parents to really hone in on what do we think the real needs are. And then we can really, I think, create much more macro systems of support.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the next question. And this one will be initiated by just Janice Powers. The question is for all. The International Baccalaureate program being offered at the middle school emphasizes a global mindset that heavily focuses on developing critical thinking skills across disciplines and being able to express one's thinking in writing. There once was talk about bringing the International Baccalaureate Diploma program to the high school. We continue to offer AP and dual enrollment classes. Why do you think there's reluctance to fully implement the IB?
I think part of the reluctance could be based on making sure our kids are prepared for the standards set by New York State, and also the variety of standardized testing that just exists in our current academic system. I think the IB program has a lot of pluses, and I think it's very akin to the sort of thinking and analysis that you would do at the college level, where you don't have the burden of taking your AP test, taking your regents, taking your, your ACT type of testing. So I think that is the source of the reluctance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to Michael Owen McShane.
Thank you. Yes, I think there's a lot of pros and cons to the IB. Actually, my sister-in-law, who went through an IB program and loved it. And I think maybe part of the reluctance is people's familiarity with AP classes, and that those are recognized, very widely across the United States. And some people may not want to lose that. The IB, of course, is recognized internationally and has a well-rounded, well-organized curriculum, and puts a emphasis on critical thinking and independent projects. I think, doing independent projects like research is a very good experience for our students to have. There's also a focus on social responsibility, and that's also a good experience for students to have. I guess some of the downsides do include the heavy workload. And I think there is a group of students, and these were probably the students that used to take the honors classes that aren't there anymore, that are looking for a rigorous curriculum, but maybe not the heavy workload of full IB or an AP class. And I think we need to listen to those students also and make sure that the curriculum is matching their needs. And also, I think there is a perception that IB is very focused on humanities and arts, the liberal arts, and many of our students are very, advanced in science and math. And certainly with the AP classes, AP physics, chemistry, statistics, computer science, you can go on. And I think there is a real commitment to the AP courses for their rigor in science and math.
Thank you. All right, we're going now to Jess Young.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think the IB program is great in the middle years where we have it. I mean, this is a time when our kids are coming together from all parts of the town, and the interdisciplinary nature of the programming and the opportunity for group projects and small group work, I think is perfect for them to do in the middle school timeframe. I think there's probably a bit more rigor that we could even add to the work that we're doing in the middle school based on what the standards are for the IB. But and I think I agree with a lot of the comments that were already said about what happens when you go to high school and the other requirements that you need to have and that you want on your transcript for college, because we don't have the IB program developed there. So I think it would have to be a choice. And I think that's why there's a resistance, a choice of whether you're taking this IB path or if you're doing the regents and focusing on the AP, doing both, is very difficult here. So I think related to IB, that the programming and the goals of it are maybe better suited to move down through K to K5. And I think this goes back to some of the other goals that we've talked about tonight with authentic learning and creating those opportunities for community exchange. And so I would almost argue that maybe the next way we would want to expand this program is into the K5 years where they do already do some of this teamwork and small group work and project-based learning. But I would partner that, I would be interested in trying to partner that with work across the district.
Thank you. Next is Ian Rowe.
Well, thank you for the question. So as I mentioned earlier, for the last 10 years, I ran a network of public charter schools that were elementary and middle schools. And I'm really excited that we just got approval from the State University of New York for the first time, to run an innovative new network, which we're launching next year, September of 2022, which is going to be a character-based international baccalaureate network of high schools right in the heart of the South Bronx. We want to bring a world-class curriculum to kids that deserve access to the best. And in that curriculum, we're actually not only implementing the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program, which is usually a pathway to college, we're also implementing the International Baccalaureate Careers Model, which is really innovative because it allows students to take apprenticeships and internships in high school in grades 11 and 12. So we'll likely have computer science, architecture, it's probably something in healthcare as our first three industries. And I think it's a really interesting model. Certainly something I think should be considered in Pelham, but this is one of those things that the board, can't micromanage. I mean, ultimately, this is what the school has to decide. But I do think they're interesting things to balance out. International Baccalaureate has an incredible track record. AP does as well. And again, we're not alone. I'm familiar with many schools across the country and know the leaders that have dealt with this question. Should we continue with IB and continue AP? If we do, how do we do so? If we don't, how do we transition? It's a real strategy. But again, there's a lot of smart people who have done these things, and I'm tapped into that network, especially because I'm launching a network of international baccalaureate high schools that are implementing both the diploma program and the careers program. So I think there's a lot of promise. And I think those are the kinds of things that will continue to put Pelham on the map as one of the most exceptional school systems in the entire country.
Thank you. Closing this question up will be Eileen Miller.
Thank you. I'm hearing that my internet is being a little glitchy, so I apologize. So with respect to the IB diploma program, I have a little bit of experience with it only because the school where my kids used to attend before we moved to Pelham was also implementing the diploma program. So I learned a little bit about it. I don't know why there is reluctance, but I imagine it has something to do with scheduling, that it's hard to maintain that many levels in different classes. The IB is a particular curriculum and has a very different way to measure students. And for a long time, we've had AP here in Pelham, but I'm not totally convinced that Mr. Berkowitz isn't looking into it. I think that he absolutely could be putting efforts towards that, and I have heard it talked about. So I'm hopeful that that's something that we do a much fuller review of. The one thing I will say is that I believe all of our teachers, with the inclusion of the IB program in the middle years, have brought a much greater global mindset and emphasis on critical thinking to our existing curriculum. And that is something that's been incredibly successful. And we've seen, amazing projects come out of the 8th grade projects, and that follows them into 9th and 10th grade. And so I think we're getting a lot of those benefits, and obviously the diploma program is a whole other level and very valuable to students who graduate with that diploma, but I don't think that we're missing out entirely.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question left, and we're getting very close to the wire. So let's see if we can fit this question in, and it will be led off by Michael Owen Machine. And the question is, teachers are the backbone of our schools, and their responsibilities to all students are likely to grow in complexity in the near term. How do you think the Board of Ed should use the strategic plan as a framework to shape the professional development of our teachers and support staff? Michael Owen Machine.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I agree 100% that teachers are the backbone. The building doesn't teach our children. The furniture doesn't teach our children. The technology doesn't teach our children. It's our teachers. And I believe we all learned that over the past year. I know I'm certainly not a teacher. And I think probably many other parents out there figured out too. I have a lot of gratitude towards our teachers. As I said, both of my parents are retired public school teachers. And I feel like because of that, I've been around teachers my whole life. I grew up in the teacher's lounge. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. And yeah, I absolutely want to support our teachers. One thing that I learned from my parents, and when we're talking about professional development, I think we have to listen to teachers. And when it comes to paid consultants and new ideas in education, we need to address it with a little bit of skepticism. I'll give you an example. My mom always talks about one program that was rolled out called the primary program. And she was a first grade teacher, and they decided, let's put kindergarten, first, second, and third grade all together in one room. And my mom would say, how am I supposed to teach a kid that's just learning their letters and a kid that's reading a chapter book? This is crazy. But that's what the educational consultants came up with. That was the fad and the fashion at the time. Another thing that I lived through personally was my high school was built with no walls. So it was just one big open room. Now later, of course, the district had to spend millions of dollars to put walls in because you can't have a class with no walls. You can't hear anything. There's too much commotion. But that was a fad and a fashion back then. I'm trained in science. I completed a research fellowship funded by the National Institutes of Health, and I evaluate things based on science and evidence. So any professional development that we're training our teachers in, I believe must have evidence that it actually improves educational outcomes. So we need to support our teachers by improving their buildings that they work in, and definitely with supporting them financially.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Jess Young.
Great, thank you. Totally agree that the teachers are the backbone, and they've made this last year happen. Thank you, teachers. I think, the strategic plan does shape the development that the teachers do already. I had a lot of questions about how these classes were determined, and I talked to Dr. Garcia about it at the beginning of this year. And it's basically a self-selection process, and the teachers propose the professional development classes that they want to do, and oftentimes one teacher will teach something that they already know to the other teachers. So in the big list of all the professional development that we see the teachers have the option to choose from, it is actually divided out into the different pillars of the strategic plan, like what each course is focused on. So I do think there is that reflection in the professional development the teachers do. That they all know our strategic plan, they operate under these principles, and they believe in it. So that's how they think about helping and teaching our students. So it is reflected in the work that they do. And I think, just as we talked about earlier, ways that we think the strategic plan can be implemented, the teachers have ideas for that too, and they're going to put those forth and share those with their fellow teachers so that they all learn together and we all develop and evolve the strategic plan.
Thank you. Next speaker, Ian Rowe.
Yeah, this area of professional development for teachers is a really important one, especially as we emerge out of COVID. As I have conversations with educational leaders across the country, the idea is what have been some of the innovations that were actually created over the last year that should survive and actually help children. So as one example, I was part of a team last summer that once we recognized, we've lost the four walls of a classroom, we as educational leaders, we've always been obsessed with this question of how do you capitalize on your top talent, right? So you might have a great fourth grade teacher and the other teachers in fourth grade are good, but this one is really amazing, but you've never figured out because of scheduling and all sorts of barriers, how to capitalize on that talent in such a way they could help build the capacity of other teachers or improve the outcomes for kids. And we created this idea of a mentor-teacher, partner-teacher relationship where we recruited 15 of the most incredible mentor teachers across the country who would each have their own classroom, and they partnered with more than 500 partner teachers in 17 states, 12,000 kids, where in grades 3 through 8, you had a mentor teacher who had a video class of their own kids about a day or two teaching a class ahead of other teachers in the same grade, same subject. And what we did was we captured the video of the mentor teacher. And so on a daily basis, the partner teachers in the same grade, same subject, who were about to teach the same lesson the next day, could have real-time professional development where the mentor teacher could say, here are the moves that I made. Here are the questions that the kids asked. Here are the really innovative things you can do in your classroom. And the opportunity to have professional development with one of the best teachers in the country is a really powerful model of professional development. And I'm speaking with a lot of my colleagues who are saying, how can we create that same kind of innovation within our own systems? Could that kind of structure exist? So again, I'm really excited to bring these kinds of ideas because a lot of great stuff is happening across the country. And I think we can bring that kind of innovation to professional development, curriculum, and once again, really excited to hopefully have the opportunity to join the board to bring those kinds of ideas.
Thank you. Next speaker, Eileen Miller.
Thank you. So my approach to this, and I want to say that the teachers have been utterly fantastic. Somebody recently wrote that at a time when we were asking so much of the teachers, they gave us more than we asked for. And that could not be more true. So I'm incredibly grateful to that. I think that what we've all learned is that our teachers are extraordinary professionals and they know what they need. I think that our first step is to ask them what kind of supports they need. How are they going to be ready to love being in the classroom again and have it be really effective? I think that, in addition to all the academics, we're going to have to provide social emotional supports to the teachers specifically. They're going to be dealing with situations they've never seen before, and we need to be able to support them in that. I think that there is lots of great professional development happening out there, and I think even in our district, we overcame some big obstacles with virtual teaching and doing all of that better and better as every month of the pandemic rolled along. And we should definitely benefit from that. But I think it all has to be grounded in what these professionals tell us that they need help doing.
Thank you. Okay, so wait a minute. We still have Janice Powers. Janice Powers is closing this question up.
Okay, thank you. So I also agree, like everyone, that teachers are the backbone. And I definitely applaud our teachers because in my personal life during the pandemic, I could barely figure out how to take care of all the responsibilities I had simultaneously during the worst part of the shutdown. And the fact that they were able to show up and, do their jobs to the capacity that they did is definitely something that should be applauded. I think teachers should be able to focus on what they do best, which is teach. Obviously, listening to our teachers, they should have a voice at every committee level and direct lines of communication so that we know what they need and what they're going through. Also, I am a big advocate for using student teachers to assist our main teachers, our full-time tenured teachers in classes. I think we need to continue to be mindful of our class sizes as our community changes and more people move into this beautiful community. How does that affect our class sizes? And what are we doing to make sure that our teachers aren't overwhelmed in class sizes that are too large? We should continue to reward and celebrate, but in terms also of any challenges or things that come up in the classroom that obstruct the teacher's ability to provide the lesson to the students, we should have clear guidelines and policies and paths of delegation. Like, the teachers should not be the ones to have to resolve every problem that comes up in the classroom. Let them refer it to, the directors, the assistant superintendents, the school principal, have those avenues of support so they can also refocus the class on the lessons. And just, continue to have open dialogue. And in terms of professional development, of course, they should have a choice in, where they want to develop. But there are some trainings that are mandatory, not just because they're state mandated, but because they're the betterment of all of the pillars of the of our strategic plan. And so, and when there are instances where a teacher is undergoing a training, they should have a voice in that. If they feel that they're not receiving, or they disagree, their voice, their agency matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Now this is our closing, and we do it in reverse order. Can we still go on, Beth? Okay? We're doing it in reverse order. So number 5 is going to go first, and that's 30 seconds, only 30 seconds to close up. And Michael Owen Mashane, you go first.
First, we made it. Thank you to all the candidates for taking the time to run. I've enjoyed learning about you during our many, many PTA presentations. And thank you to the parents and voters tonight for taking the time to tune in and for the sacrifices you and your children have made. I truly believe that your sacrifices saved lives. I ask that you please vote for me, Michael Owen Mashane, because I will use my medical knowledge to help with COVID, always listen to parents, and stay laser focused on high academic achievement for every student. Thank you.
Thank you. Janice Powers is next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, PTAC, and thank you, families of Pelham. Okay, we are a high-performing public school district. Our strategic plan underscores academic excellence and other goals like cultural competence, the whole child, and authentic learning that are not either or propositions, but are both and propositions. We don't have to compromise excellence to also create a learning environment where all Pelham students feel welcome and safe, and have the ability to fulfill their own potential and become lifelong learners and civically engaged change makers.
Thank you.
On May 18th. Thank you.
Eileen Miller, you're up.
Thank you all for the opportunity to tell the community more about my experience and also my vision for our future. I can say confidently that I am ready to go on day 1 because of the tremendous learning that I've done in my first term. I am excited to get back to work, particularly as we recover from this year and the interruption in learning. I am all in. Thank you all, and please vote for me, Eileen Miller, for a second term on the Pelham Board of Education.
Thank you. And Ian Rowe, you're up.
Let me just do this in the voice of, I just got this message yesterday from a young woman who graduated from Girls Prep, one of the schools in our network, where she said, at Girls Prep, I learned as a girl I can accomplish anything. I can be good in math, science, or English. I can be a lawyer, doctor, or teacher if I choose to. Attending Howard University empowered me as a Black woman, just as Girls Prep empowered me as a woman. And her mom sent me a message, thanks for providing her a strong foundation. It was really inspiring, and that's why I've done this work throughout my career, and I can't wait to join the team to build and reinforce this idea of inspiring a mission of excellence for all students.
Thanks. And closing it up will be Jess Young.
Yes, I'm Jess Young. I think I forgot to say my name. I was so nervous at the beginning, but it's been really great on this grand tour with everyone. And in closing, I just want to say, I really believe in the Pelham Public School System. We moved here for the small community and excellent schools. I appreciate and value the partnership our schools have with the community. And my priority on the Board of Education is to listen to the diverse opinions of our students, the parents, our teachers, and our administrators. I know firsthand the commitment and collaboration required to serve this community, and I enjoy this work. So I hope you vote on May 18th. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, turning it back to Beth Blank. who chairs up the PTA Council. Thank you very much.
Eileen.
It's a pleasure.
Just a few items to take care of. I want to thank you all for coming this evening. I'd like to thank our moderator, Ms. Nadelson, and my son, Mr. Blanc, for their time, as well as wish all the candidates good luck. A big thank you to the PTA Council Executive Board, who spent countless hours to ensure that this forum was fair and equitable for all of our candidates. What else did I have to say here? Thank you to the community for your thought-provoking and multiple questions. You had us on our toes, and we hope we answered all of your questions. Thank you for staying with us this evening. Last reminder to please come out and vote next Tuesday, May 18th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the Pelham Middle School Gymnasium. And a reminder to have your K-5 children participate in the Kids Vote, which will also be held in the middle school lobby from 3 to 8 p.m. We are voting on Ice Pop Day, PJ Day, STEAM Challenge, and Sports Team Day. Thank you all for attending, and this concludes the 2021 Board of Education Candidate Forum. Thank you. Good evening.